If you were sober, I'd be the one to make the first move. Those words hung in the air between Elena Cross and Daniel Brooks like a loaded gun, one neither of them dared to pick up. She was the CEO who built an empire from nothing. He was the single father who couldn't afford to lose everything again. One drunken, almost kiss at a company party, one moment of weakness, and now both their worlds were about to shatter. But before we dive into how it all fell apart, let me take you back to where it began, to the night that changed everything. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's get started. Daniel Brooks stood in the hallway of the Sterling Industries Tower at 11:47 on a Friday night, his reflection ghosting across the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering sprawl of downtown. His tie was loosened, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and his eyes burned with the kind of exhaustion that came from juggling spreadsheets and bedtime stories in the same day. He shouldn't still be here. Mia had a field trip in the morning, something about a pumpkin patch and hayrides that she'd been talking about for weeks. Mrs. Chen, his neighbor and lifesaver of a babysitter, had agreed to get her ready and to the school on time. But Daniel hated missing these things. He'd already missed so much. 3 years. That's how long it had been since the accident that took his wife, Sarah. 3 years of learning how to braid hair from YouTube videos, how to cook something other than mac and cheese from a box, how to answer questions like, "Where's mommy?" with something that wouldn't break both their hearts all over again. And just when he thought he'd found his footing, when he thought maybe they were going to be okay, his company had folded. Budget cuts, they'd said. Restructuring. 23 people let go in a single afternoon, and Daniel Brooks, junior financial analyst and father of one, was among them. For 2 months, he'd sent out resumes while Mia watched cartoons. For 2 months, he'd smiled through interviews while calculating how many more weeks the savings would last. For 2 months, he'd barely slept. And then Elena Cross had called him herself. Not HR, not some recruiter. The CEO of Sterling Industries, Forbes 30 Under 30, TED Talk sensation, the woman who'd taken her father's failing tech company and transformed it into a multi-billion-dollar empire, had personally offered him a position as senior financial strategist. It felt like a miracle. It felt like a mistake. "Brooks, you still here?" Daniel turned to find Marcus Chen leaning against the door frame of the conference room, jacket slung over one shoulder, his normally pristine appearance slightly rumpled. Marcus was one of the senior VPs, a guy who'd been with Sterling since the early days, back when Elena was still fighting her board for every decision. "Just finishing up the quarterly projections," Daniel said, gesturing toward his laptop, still open on the conference table. "Wanted to make sure everything was clean before the board meeting Monday." Marcus laughed, shaking his head. "You know, most people would have left hours ago, right? The party downstairs ended at 10. I heard the music," Daniel admitted. Sterling's annual autumn gala, champagne, hors d'oeuvres, networking that Daniel had exactly zero interest in. He'd made an appearance, shook the necessary hands, then slipped away the moment it was acceptable. "Elena's still down there," Marcus said, something strange in his voice, "holding court with the investors. You know how she gets." Daniel did know. In the 6 months he'd worked here, he'd learned that Elena Cross was brilliant, demanding, and completely unwilling to accept anything less than perfection, from herself or anyone else. She was 32 years old and commanded boardrooms full of men twice her age. She wore power suits like armor and could dismantle a bad business proposal in 3 sentences or less. She also worked longer hours than anyone Daniel had ever met, including himself. "I should get going anyway," Daniel said, closing his laptop. "Early morning tomorrow." "Mia?" Marcus asked. He'd met Daniel's daughter once, when she'd had to come to the office during a babysitter emergency. She'd charmed half the executive floor by drawing pictures of everyone and insisting that Marcus looked like a superhero. "Field trip," Daniel confirmed, smiling despite his exhaustion. "Pumpkins and hay bales. The important stuff." Marcus's expression softened. "You're a good dad, Brooks. Don't let this place make you forget that." There was weight to those words, something unspoken that Daniel didn't quite catch. Before he could ask, Marcus clapped him on the shoulder and headed toward the elevators, leaving Daniel alone with the city lights and the distant hum of the building's late-night cleaning crew. He should go home. He should pack up his things, catch the subway, relieve Mrs. Chen, and check on Mia one more time before crashing for a few hours of sleep. Instead, he found himself walking toward the executive stairwell, the one that led down to the penthouse conference level where the gala had been held. He told himself he was just taking a different route, that he wasn't looking for anyone in particular. He was a terrible liar, even to himself. The penthouse level was mostly dark when he emerged from the stairwell, the catering staff long gone, chairs stacked along the walls. The floor-to-ceiling windows here offered an even more spectacular view, the kind of view that made you feel like you were floating above the world, untouchable and infinite. And there, silhouetted against those windows, was Elena Cross. She'd kicked off her heels. Daniel could see them abandoned near one of the tables, and she stood barefoot on the marble floor, one hand pressed against the glass, her dark hair falling loose from whatever style it had been pinned into earlier. She still wore her gown, something sleek and midnight blue that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. She looked small, standing there alone, vulnerable in a way that Elena Cross never allowed herself to be during business hours. Daniel should leave, should turn around right now and pretend he'd never seen this private moment. "I can hear you thinking from here, Brooks." Her voice carried across the empty space, not turning around. Daniel's heart did something complicated in his chest. "Sorry," he said, taking a few steps closer. "I was just heading out. Didn't mean to intrude." "You're not." She finally turned, and Daniel could see that her eyes were bright. Too bright. The champagne, he realized. He'd seen her with a glass earlier, then another. "You're never an intrusion. You're one of the only people in this building who doesn't want something from me." That wasn't entirely true, but Daniel didn't correct her. What he wanted from Elena Cross wasn't something he could ask for, wasn't something he had any right to want in the first place. "How was the party?" he asked instead, keeping his distance, keeping things professional. Elena laughed, the sound sharp and slightly bitter. "Exhausting, productive, the usual performance." She gestured vaguely at the empty room. 23 investors, each one convinced they're the reason we're successful, each one ready to pull funding the moment we show any weakness. "We're not weak," Daniel said automatically, and Elena's smile shifted into something more genuine. "No," she agreed, "we're not. Thanks in part to you, actually. That projection model you built last month? It bought us 6 months of breathing room with the Singapore account." Pride bloomed warm in Daniel's chest, but he kept his expression neutral. "Just doing my job." "You're doing it better than most." Elena moved away from the window, padding barefoot across the marble toward the bar that had been set up for the event. "Want a drink? I promise I won't tell HR that I corrupted you." "I should really—" "One drink, Brooks. Humor me. It's been a long night, and I could use the company." She was already pouring 2 glasses of something amber and expensive looking. "Unless you have somewhere else to be." He did. He absolutely did. "One drink," Daniel heard himself say. Elena handed him a glass and their fingers brushed, just for a second, just enough for Daniel to notice how cold her hands were despite the warmth of the room. She settled onto one of the leather couches that ringed the conversation area, tucking her feet under her in a gesture so casual, so unlike the controlled CEO persona she wore like armor, that Daniel felt something crack in his chest. He sat across from her, maintaining the safe distance of the coffee table between them. "Tell me about Mia's field trip," Elena said, surprising him. "You mentioned it earlier this week." Daniel blinked. "You remember that?" "I remember most things." She sipped her drink, watching him over the rim of the glass. "Hazard of the job. So? Pumpkins?" Despite himself, Daniel smiled. "Pumpkins and a petting zoo, apparently. She's been planning her outfit for days. Currently it involves her fairy wings and rain boots." "Sounds perfect," Elena said softly. "She's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have her," Daniel corrected. "She's the only thing that kept me going after—" He stopped, not sure why he was saying this, why it felt safe to say it here in this dimly lit room with this woman who barely knew him. "After your wife died," Elena finished gently. "I know. I read your file." Of course she had. Elena Cross didn't hire anyone without knowing everything about them first. "I'm sorry," she added. "That must have been impossibly hard." "It was." Daniel stared into his glass, watching the light refract through the liquid. Some days it still is, but Mia makes it worth it, makes everything worth it. When he looked up, Elena was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something raw and aching and quickly hidden behind her usual composure. I admire that, she said. The way you love her. The way you show up for her, no matter what. That's just being a parent, Daniel said, uncomfortable with the praise. No, Elena said quietly. It's not. Trust me. There was a story there, Daniel could tell. Something in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her fingers tightened around her glass. But before he could ask, Elena stood abruptly, moving back to the windows. Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? She asked, her back to him. Like you made a series of choices that made perfect sense at the time, and now you're here, and you look around and think, is this really what I wanted? Daniel stood slowly, setting down his glass. Are we still talking about you? Elena laughed again, that same sharp sound. I don't know, maybe we're talking about both of us. She turned, and Daniel saw that her eyes were definitely too bright now, her movements just slightly unsteady. You know what the worst part is? I'm good at this, running the company, making the deals, playing the game. I'm so good at it that everyone assumes it's enough, that this is all I need. But it's not, Daniel said softly. But it's not, she echoed. She took a step toward him, then another, and Daniel's heart started beating faster. Do you know how rare it is to meet someone who doesn't see me as Elena Cross, CEO? Who just sees me? Elena, you do that, she continued, closing the distance between them until she was close enough that Daniel could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that made his head swim. You see me, and I hate it because it makes me want things I can't have, things I've spent 10 years convincing myself I don't need. She was drunk. Not falling down drunk, but enough that her carefully constructed walls were crumbling, enough that Daniel could see the loneliness underneath all that power and success. And heaven help him, he understood it, because he saw her too, and he'd been trying not to for 6 months straight. You should sit down, he said, even though his voice came out rougher than intended. Have some water, I'll call your driver. I don't want my driver, Elena said, swaying slightly. I don't want to go home to my empty apartment and my empty bed and pretend that I'm fine with being alone. She reached up, her hand trembling slightly as she touched his face, just her fingertips against his jaw, barely any pressure at all. Daniel stopped breathing. You know what I want? Elena whispered, and she was so close now that he could count the gold flecks in her brown eyes. I want to stop thinking for 5 minutes. I want to stop being the person everyone needs me to be. I want... She leaned in, rising on her toes, and Daniel's hands came up automatically, catching her gently by the shoulders, holding her steady, holding her back. Elena, he said, and his voice was shaking now too. Stop. She froze, confusion and hurt flashing across her face. Why? Because you've had too much to drink, Daniel said, each word costing him something. Because you're my boss, and this, whatever this is, it can't happen like this. I'm not that drunk, Elena protested, but even she didn't sound convinced. Drunk enough, Daniel said. His hands were still on her shoulders, and he forced himself to let go, to step back, to put necessary space between them. Listen to me. If you were sober, if you were completely sober and you still wanted this, I'd be the one to make the first move. Do you understand? I'd be the one, because He stopped himself before he could finish that sentence, before he could admit something that would destroy them both. Elena stared at him, her eyes wide and wounded and starting to clear as reality crashed back in. Oh, she whispered. Oh, God. Daniel, I... Don't, he said quickly. We're going to forget this happened. You're going to sit down, drink some water, and I'm going to call your driver. And Monday morning, we're going to be professional. We're going to be colleagues. Nothing more. But nothing more, Daniel repeated more firmly. I can't lose this job, Elena. I can't afford to lose it, and neither can Mia. So we're going to pretend this never happened. Okay? Elena looked like she wanted to argue, wanted to push back, but something in his expression must have convinced her. She nodded slowly, wrapping her arms around herself. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Me too, Daniel said, and he meant it more than she could possibly know. He found a bottle of water, made sure she drank it, called her driver, and waited with her, at a careful, professional distance, until the car arrived. She didn't speak again, just gathered her shoes and her dignity and walked out of the penthouse level like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just shattered every carefully maintained boundary between them. Daniel waited until the elevator doors closed before he let himself slump against the wall, his hand shaking, his heart racing, his entire body screaming at him for being an idiot. If you were sober, I'd be the one to make the first move. What the hell had he been thinking, saying that? Admitting that? He knew what he'd been thinking. He'd been thinking about 6 months of late-night conversations while they worked through budget projections. 6 months of noticing the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the way she smiled when she thought no one was watching, the way she asked about Mia like she genuinely cared. 6 months of falling for someone completely, impossibly out of his reach. And now he'd gone and ruined it. Because Elena would remember this. Drunk or not, she'd remember Monday morning, and things would be weird, and eventually she'd realize that having Daniel Brooks around was more trouble than it was worth. She'd find a reason to let him go, and he'd be back where he started, unemployed and desperate, and trying to explain to his 5-year-old why they had to move again. Daniel pushed off the wall and headed for the stairs, too agitated for the elevator. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out to find a text from Mrs. Chen. Mia's asleep. No rush getting home. Hope the party wasn't too awful. Too awful didn't begin to cover it. Daniel made it to the ground floor, through the lobby with its marble and its glass and its false promises of stability, and out into the October night. The air was crisp and cold, cutting through his dress shirt and shocking him back to reality. He told himself when he took this job that he'd be smart about it, that he'd work hard, keep his head down, and build something stable for Mia. He'd promised himself he wouldn't make any stupid decisions, wouldn't take any unnecessary risks. And what had he done instead? He'd gone and fallen for his boss. Not just his boss, Elena Cross, a woman so far beyond his reach that it would be laughable if it weren't so pathetic. The subway was nearly empty at this hour. Just a few other late-night workers and a couple of college kids heading home from parties. Daniel found a seat and stared at his reflection in the dark window, seeing someone who looked older than 35, tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Sarah used to tell him he worried too much, that things had a way of working out if you just trusted the universe a little. But Sarah was gone, and the universe had already taken so much that Daniel couldn't afford to trust it anymore. His phone buzzed again. Another text, but not from Mrs. Chen this time. Unknown. Number. I remember what you said about making the first move. I'll remember Monday morning too. Daniel stared at the message for 3 stops, his heart doing complicated things in his chest. She remembered. She'd remember Monday. He should feel relieved, should feel grateful that she was acknowledging what happened, that maybe they could move past it professionally. Instead, all he felt was a sick sense of dread, because he absolutely knew, that Monday morning was going to change everything. The weekend passed in a blur of normal moments that felt anything but normal. Saturday morning, Daniel took Mia to her field trip and smiled through all the right moments, watching her chase chickens in the petting zoo, helping her pick the perfect pumpkin, laughing when she got hay in her hair. He took pictures and made jokes with the other parents and pretended that his entire world wasn't teetering on the edge of disaster. That night, after Mia was asleep, he pulled up his resume and stared at it for an hour before closing the laptop without making any changes. What was the point? Even if he started looking now, it would take months to find something else. And in the meantime, he had bills to pay and a daughter to feed and no safety net to fall back on. Sunday, he took Mia to the park and pushed her on the swings until his arms ached, grateful for the distraction, grateful that she was 5 years old and innocent and had no idea that her father was falling apart. "Higher, Daddy!" she shrieked, her laughter bright and perfect and everything worth protecting. "Any higher and you'll hit the clouds," Daniel teased, but he pushed harder anyway. "I wish Mommy could see me," Mia said suddenly, her voice cutting through the autumn air like a knife. Daniel's hands faltered on the swing, and he had to force himself to keep the rhythm steady. She can see you, sweetheart. She's always watching. Do you think she's proud of me? Mia asked, and Daniel's heart cracked clean open. She's so proud of you, he said, his voice thick. So proud. And so am I. Mia twisted around to look at him, her dark hair, Sarah's hair, flying around her face. Are you sad, Daddy? No, baby. I'm happy. I'm with you, aren't I? Mia seemed satisfied with that answer, turning back around and demanding to be pushed higher. Daniel obliged, blinking back the burn in his eyes, focusing on the simple mechanics of the moment. Push, release, repeat. If only everything else in life could be that simple. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp, clear weather that felt like mockery. Daniel woke up before his alarm, showered, dressed in his best suit, armor, he thought grimly, and made Mia her favorite breakfast, even though his stomach was in knots. You look fancy, Mia observed, swinging her legs from her chair at their tiny kitchen table. Is today special? Just another Monday, Daniel lied, kissing the top of her head. Mrs. Chen is going to pick you up from school today, okay? I might have to work late. It wasn't true. He had no intention of working late, but he needed an exit strategy, just in case. Just in case Elena decided that having him around was too complicated, just in case this all blew up in his face the way he was terrified it would. Okay, Mia said easily. Can we make cookies when you get home? Absolutely, Daniel promised, and he meant it. Whatever happened today, he'd come home and make cookies with his daughter and pretend everything was fine. The subway ride felt endless, every stop stretching longer than it should. Daniel used the time to rehearse what he'd say when he saw Elena. Professional, apologetic, clear boundaries. I'm sorry for Friday night. I overstepped. It won't happen again. Simple. Clean. Professional. The words felt like ash in his mouth. Sterling Industries rose up against the morning sky, all glass and steel and impossible dreams. Daniel took the elevator to the 15th floor where the finance department lived, bypassing the executive levels entirely. Coward, a voice in his head whispered. Sarah's voice, maybe. Or his own. He'd barely settled at his desk when his computer pinged with a calendar notification. Meeting with E. Cross. 9:00 a.m. Executive Conference Room A. Daniel's blood ran cold. It was 8:47. He stared at the notification like it might change if he looked at it long enough. She wanted to see him. Privately. This morning. This was it. This was her letting him down easy, probably. Thanking him for his discretion, offering him a generous severance package, maybe even a good reference. She'd be kind about it because Elena was nothing if not professional. Daniel's hands were shaking as he stood up. Marcus was at the coffee machine, and he looked up with a grin that faded when he saw Daniel's expression. You okay, Brooks? You look like you're heading to an execution. Close enough, Daniel thought. Just a meeting with Cross, probably nothing. Marcus's expression shifted into something more serious. Hey, listen. Whatever happens up there, remember you've got people in your corner down here, okay? Elena's tough, but she's fair. Daniel managed a weak smile. Thanks, Marcus. The executive level was quieter than the rest of the building, all expensive carpet and artwork that probably cost more than Daniel's car. The receptionist waved him through with a knowing smile that made his stomach churn. Conference Room A was at the end of the hall, the door closed. Daniel stood outside it for a full 30 seconds, gathering his courage before finally knocking. Come in. Elena's voice, cool and professional. Daniel pushed open the door. She was standing by the windows, always the windows, wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost a fortune and looking like she hadn't slept any better than he had. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, her makeup flawless, every inch the CEO, except for her eyes. Her eyes gave her away. Close the door, Elena said quietly. Daniel did, and the click of the latch sounded unnaturally loud in the silence. Thank you for coming, Elena continued, still not looking at him. I know it's awkward. After Friday. It's fine, Daniel said automatically. We don't have to eat. Yes, we do. Elena finally turned to face him, and Daniel saw that her carefully constructed composure was paper thin. We absolutely have to talk about this, because if we don't, it's going to poison everything. And I can't. I won't let that happen. Daniel nodded slowly, not trusting himself to speak. Elena took a breath. I was drunk Friday night. Not an excuse, just a fact. I said things and did things that were inappropriate, especially given our working relationship. I want to apologize for that, for making you uncomfortable, for putting you in an impossible position. You don't need to apologize, Daniel started, but Elena held up a hand. Let me finish, please. She moved closer, her heels clicking on the polished floor. You were right to stop what was happening. You were professional and appropriate, and I'm grateful for that. But Daniel, what you said about making the first move if I were sober, did you mean it? Every instinct Daniel had screamed at him to lie, to laugh it off, to claim he'd just been trying to let her down easy, to protect them both. But he'd never been good at lying, especially not to himself. Yes, he said quietly. I meant it. Elena closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. That's what I was afraid of. I'll resign, Daniel said quickly. Effective immediately. I'll make it easy for you. I'll say it was personal reasons, family stuff. No one has to know. No. Elena's voice was sharp enough to cut. Absolutely not. You're not going anywhere. Daniel stared at her, confused. But you just said, I said I was afraid, not that I wanted you gone. Elena moved closer still, close enough that Daniel could see the fine tremor in her hands. I'm afraid because I feel it too. Whatever this is between us, I feel it. And it terrifies me because I don't know how to do this. How to be professional and ethical and appropriate while also being honest about the fact that every time you walk into a room, She stopped herself, pressing her lips together. Elena, Daniel whispered. We can't do this, she said firmly, but her voice shook. You know we can't. I'm your superior. The power dynamic alone makes it impossible. And if anyone found out, it wouldn't just be our jobs at risk. It would be the company, the investors, everything I've built. I know, Daniel said. I know all of that. But you meant what you said, Elena pressed, about making the first move. Yes. Even knowing all the risks? Even knowing what it could cost you? Daniel thought about Mia, about bills and stability, and all the promises he'd made to himself about being smart and careful. He thought about Sarah and the life they'd planned together, the future that had been stolen from them. And then he thought about Elena, brilliant, lonely Elena, who'd built an empire and forgotten to build a life. And he told her the truth. Even knowing all of that, he said quietly, if you were sober and you wanted this, I'd still make the first move. Because what I feel when I'm around you, it's not professional, it's not appropriate, but it's real. Elena made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. We're idiots. Probably, Daniel agreed. We can't act on this, Elena said, but she was moving closer, drawn by the same impossible gravity that Daniel felt. We have to be smart. We have to maintain boundaries. Strict boundaries, Daniel echoed, and they were close enough now that he could see the pulse jumping in her throat. So strict, Elena whispered. And then neither of them was moving closer, but somehow the distance kept shrinking anyway, until they were sharing the same breath, the same space, the same terrible, wonderful moment of possibility. Elena's phone buzzed, shattering the spell. She jumped back like she'd been burned, fumbling for her phone with shaking hands. It's the board, she said, her voice unsteady. The meeting, I have to... Go, Daniel said. I'll go. Daniel. Elena caught his arm as he turned to leave. We're going to figure this out. Somehow. We'll find a way to be professional and appropriate and completely miserable, Daniel finished. Elena's laugh was broken. Something like that. Daniel left the conference room with his heart pounding and his head spinning, and he made it exactly halfway to the elevator before Marcus intercepted him. You look like you survived, Marcus observed. That's good. Yeah, Daniel said distantly. Survived. But as he rode the elevator back down to the finance floor, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that surviving wasn't the same thing as living. And for the first time in 3 years, he wanted to do more than just survive. He wanted to live. Even if it terrified him. Even if it was impossible. Even if it meant risking everything he'd fought so hard to rebuild. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in professional torture. Daniel and Elena maintained their boundaries with the dedication of people trying to defuse a bomb. They were polite in meetings, efficient in emails, and scrupulously careful never to be alone together longer than absolutely necessary. It was working in the sense that no one seemed to notice anything amiss. It was destroying them both. Daniel could feel it in the way Elena's eyes would find him across conference rooms, in the careful distance she maintained even when reviewing documents side by side, in the slight tremor in her voice when she said his name. And he knew she could feel it in him too, in the way his breath caught when she walked past, in how he'd started arriving at the office earlier just for the chance of running into her by the coffee machine, and how he volunteered for every project that might mean a few more hours of working alongside her. They were following the rules. They were being professional. They were both going slowly and sane. "Daddy, you're burning the pancakes," Mia observed one Saturday morning, and Daniel jolted back to reality to find smoke rising from the pan. "Shoot," he muttered, flipping them onto a plate. They were definitely too dark, but Mia just smiled and drowned them in syrup anyway. "You're thinking about work again," she said matter-of-factly. "You think about work a lot now." Daniel's heart clenched. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Work's just been busy." "Is it the pretty lady? The one from the picture?" Daniel froze. "What pretty lady?" Mia jumped down from her chair and ran to where Daniel's laptop sat on the counter. She pulled up a browser window, Forbes magazine, an article about Elena from last year, and pointed to the photo. "Her," Mia said. "You were looking at her picture the other day. She's really pretty. Is she your boss?" Daniel closed the laptop gently. "Yes, she's my boss. And yes, she's pretty. But I was just reading an article for work." Mia gave him a look that was far too knowing for a 5-year-old. "Do you like her?" "It's complicated, baby." "Mommy would want you to be happy," Mia said seriously. "She told me before she went to heaven. She said you deserved to be happy." Daniel pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her tight against the sudden ache in his chest. "When did she tell you that?" "I don't remember exactly," Mia admitted, her voice muffled against his shirt. "But I remember she said it. She said you were the best person she knew, and that you should find someone who knows it too." Daniel had to close his eyes against the burn of tears. Sarah had known she was dying, had known she was leaving them, and she'd spent her last days trying to make sure they'd be okay without her. "I miss her," Mia whispered. "Me too, sweetheart. Every single day." They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other in the morning sunlight of their small kitchen, mourning what they'd lost and trying to figure out what came next. Daniel's phone buzzed. Another work email. They never stopped, even on weekends. But when he glanced at it, his heart stuttered. It wasn't about work. "E-Cross, I can't do this anymore. We need to talk. Really talk. Are you free tomorrow evening?" Daniel stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the reply button. This was it. This was Elena calling off whatever fragile détente they'd maintained, or pushing for something more, or... He didn't know. But he knew he couldn't keep going like this, caught in limbo, wanting something he couldn't have. D. Brooks. "Mia has a sleepover tomorrow. I'll be free by 7. The response came immediately. "My place. I'll send you the address." And just like that, the careful boundaries they'd built started to crumble. Elena's apartment was nothing like Daniel expected. He'd imagined something sleek and minimalist, all chrome and leather and expensive art that nobody really understood. Instead, when she opened the door Sunday evening at 7:15, he found himself looking into a space that was warm and lived in, with soft lighting and bookshelves that sagged under the weight of actual books, not just decorative spines. "You look surprised," Elena said, stepping back to let him in. She was wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, and Daniel had to remind himself to breathe. "I guess I expected something more." "Corporate?" Elena supplied, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Everyone does. Come in. I made coffee, unless you'd prefer something stronger." "Coffee's fine," Daniel said, though his hands were already shaking enough without caffeine. He followed her through the entryway into an open living space that looked out over the city. There were plants on the windowsills, photographs on the walls, a blanket draped over the couch like someone actually used it. It looked like a home. It looked like Elena had a life outside the office, even though Daniel had started to suspect she didn't. "Mia got off to her sleepover okay?" Elena asked, pouring 2 mugs of coffee in the kitchen. Daniel nodded, surprised she remembered. "Yeah, she was so excited she forgot to say goodbye, just grabbed her sleeping bag and ran." "Good." Elena handed him a mug and gestured toward the couch. "Sit, please. You're making me nervous standing there like you're ready to bolt." Daniel sat, though she wasn't wrong about the bolting. Every instinct he had was screaming that this was a bad idea, that being here alone with Elena in her personal space was crossing a line they couldn't uncross. Elena settled into the armchair across from him, curling her legs under her in that same casual gesture from the gala, and Daniel felt something twist in his chest. This was the real Elena, he realized. Not the CEO in the power suit, but the woman who read books and kept plants alive and looked impossibly young sitting there in her bare feet. "So," Elena said, wrapping her hands around her mug, "we need to talk about what's happening between us." "Do we?" Daniel asked, and immediately regretted how defensive it sounded. "I mean, we've been professional. We've maintained boundaries. Maybe we should just keep pretending?" Elena's voice was soft but firm. "Keep dancing around each other until one of us breaks?" "Because that's what's going to happen, Daniel. I can feel it. Can't you?" Daniel stared into his coffee, seeing his distorted reflection in the dark surface. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "I can feel it." I haven't been able to stop thinking about what you said," Elena continued, "about making the first move if I were sober. And the thing is, I am sober now, completely sober, and I still—" She stopped, took a breath. "I still want to know what would happen if we stopped fighting this." Daniel's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "Elena, you know why we can't. The power dynamic, the company. Everything you said before is still true." "I know," Elena said. "But I've been thinking about that too, and I realized something. The power dynamic exists because I'm your direct superior, but what if I wasn't?" Daniel looked up sharply. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I could transfer your reporting line to Marcus. He's a VP, he has the authority, and it would make sense from an organizational standpoint anyway. The finance team is getting big enough that it should split." Elena leaned forward, her expression intense. "It wouldn't eliminate all the complications, but it would remove the most problematic one." "You'd do that?" Daniel asked, his voice rough. "Restructure the department just so we could, what, date? Is that what this is?" "I don't know what this is," Elena admitted. "But I know I want to find out, and I know that I haven't felt this way about anyone in—" She laughed, the sound slightly bitter. "Ever, actually. I've never felt this way about anyone ever, which is probably pathetic for someone my age, but there it is." Daniel set down his coffee before he could spill it. His hands were shaking worse now, and it had nothing to do with caffeine. "You can't make business decisions based on personal feelings. That's exactly the kind of thing that could blow up in your face." "It's not just personal feelings," Elena countered. "The restructure makes sense regardless. I've been considering it for months. This would just be accelerating the timeline. And if it doesn't work out between us, if we try this and it falls apart—" Elena's expression softened. "Then we'll deal with it like adults. We'll be professional and appropriate, and we'll move forward. But Daniel, we're already miserable. We're already spending every day trying not to look at each other, trying not to feel what we're feeling. How is that better than taking a chance?" She had a point. Daniel hated that she had a point. "I have a daughter," he said, and his voice cracked slightly on the words. "I have a 5-year-old daughter who's already lost her mother. I can't bring someone into her life unless I'm sure, unless I know it's going to last." "You can never know that," Elena said gently. "Sarah proved that, didn't she? You can't control the future no matter how careful you are." The mention of Sarah should have felt like a violation, but somehow it didn't. Somehow it just felt honest. "Tell me about her," Elena said. "About Sarah. Tell me what happened." Daniel hadn't talked about Sarah, really talked about her, with anyone since she died. The grief counselor had tried, Mia's pediatrician had tried, well-meaning friends had tried, but Daniel had kept it locked away, too raw, too painful. But here, in Elena's warm apartment with the city lights spreading out below them, the words started coming. She was a teacher, he said quietly. 3rd grade. She loved it, loved those kids like they were her own. She used to bring home their drawings and put them on our fridge, tell me stories about their day. He smiled despite the ache in his chest. She was driving home from a parent-teacher conference when it happened. Drunk driver ran a red light. She died instantly. They told me she didn't suffer, like that was supposed to make it better. Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. How did you survive it? Mia, Daniel said simply. Mia needed me. So I survived. I got up every morning and made breakfast and braided hair and read bedtime stories, and I survived. And eventually, the surviving started to feel a little bit like living again. And now? Elena asked softly. Now I'm terrified, Daniel admitted. I'm terrified of feeling this way about someone again. I'm terrified of what it could cost if I'm wrong. I'm terrified of hurting Mia, of losing my job, of... He laughed shakily. Of everything, basically. Elena set down her own coffee and moved to the couch beside him, close but not touching. Can I tell you something about why I understand? Daniel nodded. My father built Sterling Industries from nothing, Elena began, her voice distant. He was brilliant and driven and completely absent as a parent. My mother left when I was 7, just packed her bags one day and decided she'd rather be anywhere but here. And my father's solution was to hire nannies and throw himself into work even harder. She pulled her knees to her chest, making herself smaller. I learned early that stability was an illusion, that people left, that love was conditional, that the only thing you could really count on was yourself and your own success. So I became my father's daughter. I worked harder than anyone else. I never let myself need anything or anyone, and I built a life that looked perfect from the outside. But it's lonely, Daniel said quietly. It's so lonely, Elena whispered. And then you walked into my office 6 months ago, and you looked at me like I was a person instead of a position. You asked about my day, you remembered things I said, you made me laugh. And I started to realize that maybe I'd built the wrong kind of life. Daniel's hand found hers without him consciously deciding to move. Their fingers intertwined, and Elena let out a shaky breath. I'm terrified too, she said. I'm terrified that I don't know how to do this, that I'll mess it up, that I'll hurt you or Mia or myself. But I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my life wondering what if. They sat there for a long moment, hands clasped, both of them trembling slightly with the weight of what they were admitting. If we do this, Daniel said finally, we have to be smart about it. We can't rush. Especially with Mia. She can't know about us until we're sure. I won't introduce her to someone who might leave. I understand, Elena said. We'll go slow. We'll be careful. And the restructure has to make sense on its own, Daniel continued. I won't let you compromise the company for me. It does make sense, Elena insisted. I'll have the proposal ready for the board by Wednesday. Marcus is already expecting more responsibility. And if people find out? If there's gossip? Elena's expression hardened slightly. Then we deal with it. Together. But Daniel, we can't live our lives based on what other people might think. We'll be professional, we'll be ethical, but we're allowed to have personal lives. Daniel knew she was right. He knew that they were both adults, that they were being responsible, that they had every right to pursue this connection between them. He also knew that the world didn't always care about right and responsibility. Okay, he said, the word feeling like jumping off a cliff. Okay. We'll try this slowly, carefully. Elena's smile was like sunrise. Yeah? Yeah, Daniel confirmed. And then he was smiling too, despite the fear, despite the uncertainty. But I meant what I said, about making the first move. Did you? Elena's voice had gone soft, teasing. I did. Daniel lifted his free hand slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. He brushed his fingers along her jaw, the same way she'd touched him at the gala, and watched her eyes flutter closed. If this is real, if we're really doing this, then I want to do it right. Daniel, do you want this? He asked, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. Completely sober, completely certain. Do you want this? Elena opened her eyes, and they were clear and bright and full of something that made Daniel's breath catch. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I want this. I want you." Daniel leaned in slowly, watching her face, looking for any sign of hesitation. He saw none. And when his lips finally met hers, soft and careful and achingly gentle, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The kiss was nothing like what had almost happened at the gala. There was no alcohol blurring the edges, no desperation, no pretending this was anything other than what it was. A choice. A deliberate, terrifying, wonderful choice. Elena's hand came up to curl into his shirt, pulling him closer, and Daniel let himself get lost in it for just a moment, lost in the softness of her mouth, the warmth of her body, the small sound she made when he deepened the kiss slightly. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Elena rested her forehead against his. "We're really doing this," she said, wonder in her voice. "We're really doing this," Daniel agreed. "Slowly." Elena laughed. "Right, slowly, very slowly." She kissed him again, and it was several minutes before either of them remembered what slowly meant. Eventually they migrated to opposite ends of the couch, maintaining a careful distance that lasted approximately 5 minutes before Elena's feet ended up in Daniel's lap and his hands settled on her ankles like they belonged there. They talked for hours. About everything and nothing, childhoods and college years, favorite books and terrible movies, dreams they'd given up on and dreams they were too scared to pursue. Elena told him about the first time she'd walked into the Sterling Industries boardroom as CEO, 24 years old and terrified she'd fail. Daniel told her about Mia's first day of kindergarten, how she'd marched in like she owned the place and left him standing in the hallway trying not to cry. "You really love being a dad," Elena observed, and there was something wistful in her voice. "It's the best thing I've ever done," Daniel said honestly. "Even on the hard days. Especially on the hard days, actually." "Do you want more kids?" Elena asked, then immediately looked horrified. "Sorry, that's way too serious a question for a first date. If this even counts as a first date, forget I asked." But Daniel was already considering it, turning the question over in his mind. "I don't know," he admitted. "Sarah and I talked about it. We wanted to give Mia siblings, but after she died, I couldn't imagine—" He paused. "I couldn't imagine doing it with anyone else. Having kids, I mean. It felt like it would be betraying her memory somehow." "And now?" Elena asked softly. "Now I think Sarah would tell me I was being an idiot," Daniel said, and he could almost hear her voice saying exactly that. "She'd want me to be happy, to build a new life. She was never the jealous type, even about hypothetical future relationships." Elena was quiet for a moment, her fingers playing with the hem of her sweater. "I never thought I'd have kids," she said finally. "I told myself I was too focused on my career, that I wouldn't be a good mother anyway, given my own childhood. But lately, I've been wondering if I just told myself that because it was easier than admitting I was scared." "Of what?" "Of being like my mother," Elena said quietly. "Of leaving. Of not being enough." Daniel squeezed her ankle gently. "You wouldn't leave. That's not who you are." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Daniel's voice was firm. "I've watched you for 6 months, Elena. I've seen how you care about people, even when you pretend you don't. You remember Marcus's daughter's name. You asked about Diane's husband's surgery. You stayed late to help the new analyst who was struggling with the database. You think you're cold because you're a professional, but you're not. You're just careful. And there's a difference." Elena's eyes were bright again, but this time she let the tears fall. "How do you do that?" she whispered. "Do what?" "See me. Really see me. Not the CEO, not the job title, just me." "Because that's who I fell for," Daniel said simply. "Not Elena Cross, CEO, just Elena. The woman who keeps plants alive and reads thick books and gets this little crease between her eyebrows when she's concentrating on something." Elena laughed through her tears, reaching up to touch her forehead. "I do not have a crease." "You absolutely do. It's adorable." "CEOs are not adorable." "This one is," Daniel said, and Elena threw a pillow at him, which somehow turned into both of them laughing, which turned into another kiss, which turned into Daniel checking his watch and realizing it was almost midnight. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "I told Mrs. Chen I'd be back by 1, and I still have to pick up Mia in the morning." Elena nodded, but she didn't let go of his hand. "When can I see you again?" "Wednesday?" Daniel suggested. "After you present the restructure? We could grab dinner, somewhere quiet." "Somewhere no one from work will see us," Elena added. It should have felt sneaky, shameful. Instead, it just felt practical. They were being smart, protecting themselves and the company until they knew what this was. "Wednesday," Elena agreed, and she walked him to the door, their fingers still intertwined. The goodnight kiss was supposed to be quick, just a brush of lips, a promise of more to come. Instead, it turned into Daniel pressing Elena against the door, his hands cupped around her face, kissing her like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. "Slowly," Elena gasped when they broke apart. "We said slowly." "Right, slowly." Daniel took a deliberate step back, then another. "I'm going now." "You're going now," Elena echoed, but neither of them moved. Finally, Daniel forced himself to turn around, to open the door, to step into the hallway. He made it 3 steps before Elena called his name. "Daniel?" He turned back. "I'm really happy you made the first move," she said, and her smile was shy and genuine and completely devastating. "Me too," Daniel said. "Me too." The restructure went through on Wednesday with minimal fuss. Marcus seemed genuinely pleased to be taking on more responsibility, and the board approved the organizational changes without much discussion. Daniel's new reporting line was official by 5 p.m., which meant by 5:01, Elena had sent him a text with an address. A small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, far enough from Midtown that they were unlikely to run into anyone from Sterling. Their first real date happened on a rainy Wednesday night, tucked into a corner booth, while Frank Sinatra crooned from the speakers and the smell of garlic and fresh bread filled the air. They held hands under the table like teenagers and talked about everything except work. And when Daniel walked Elena to her car afterward, the kiss goodnight lasted long enough that the rain soaked through both their coats. The second date was a Saturday afternoon at a botanical garden, walking through the greenhouse while Mia was at a birthday party. Elena pointed out rare orchids and told him stories about her college roommate who tried to grow marijuana in their dorm room using a plant identification guide. Daniel had laughed so hard he had had to sit down on a bench. The third date was dinner at Daniel's apartment, a risk, but Mia was spending the weekend at Sarah's parents' house, and Daniel wanted Elena to see his life, his home, the space where he and his daughter built their world together. Elena had stood in the middle of his small living room, looking at the photos on the walls, the art projects stuck to the fridge, the comfortable chaos of a life fully lived, and she'd said, "I love this. I love what you've built here." And Daniel had kissed her in his kitchen, surrounded by evidence of his past and present, and felt the future start to take shape. 3 weeks in, they were still keeping it secret, still being careful, still maintaining strict professional boundaries at work. No lingering looks, no casual touches, nothing that might give them away. It was harder than Daniel expected. Every meeting was an exercise in restraint, every email carefully worded to be completely neutral. He wanted to tell Marcus, wanted to tell someone, but they'd agreed to wait, to be sure. Then one night, Mia got sick. It started as a simple cold, runny nose, slight fever, nothing alarming. But by Thursday afternoon, the school nurse was calling to say Mia's temperature had spiked to 103, and could he please come get her immediately? Daniel left work at 2:30, his heart pounding, and found his daughter curled up in the nurse's office, looking small and miserable. "My head hurts, Daddy," she whimpered, and Daniel's protective instincts kicked into overdrive. He got her home, got her settled on the couch with her favorite blanket and a cool cloth on her forehead. He called the pediatrician, who said it was probably just a virus, but to monitor her overnight and bring her in the morning if she wasn't better. By midnight, Mia's fever had climbed to 104, and she was barely responsive. Daniel called 911 with shaking hands. The ambulance ride was a blur. Lights and sirens and a paramedic telling him to stay calm while his entire world reduced down to his daughter's flushed face and labored breathing. At the emergency room, they whisked her away for tests while Daniel filled out paperwork with numb fingers, his phone buzzing with increasingly frantic texts from Mrs. Chen. He didn't even think about calling Elena until 2 in the morning, sitting alone in the waiting room while they ran more tests on Mia. She answered on the first ring. "Daniel, what's wrong?" "Mia's in the hospital," he said, and his voice cracked. "She has a fever they can't get down, and they're talking about meningitis or sepsis or... Elena, I can't lose her. I can't." "Where are you?" Elena's voice was sharp, focused. "Which hospital?" "Mount Sinai, the pediatric emergency department." "But you don't have to." "I'm on my way," Elena said, and hung up before he could protest. She arrived 20 minutes later wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, and when Daniel saw her rushing through the emergency room doors, something in his chest broke open. "Any news?" she asked, sitting down beside him and taking his hand without hesitation. "They're still running tests," Daniel said. "The doctor said it could be a severe reaction to a virus, or it could be something worse. They don't know yet." Elena squeezed his hand. "She's going to be okay. Mia's a fighter." "You don't know that," Daniel said, and he could hear the hysteria creeping into his voice. "Sarah was fine 1 minute and gone the next. What if this is how I lose Mia too? What if I can't protect her?" "Daniel, look at me." Elena turned his face toward hers, her eyes fierce. "You are an incredible father. You've kept Mia safe and happy for 3 years on your own. This is not your fault. And you are not going to lose her. Do you hear me?" Daniel nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They sat there together, hands clasped, while doctors came and went with updates. The tests were taking time. Mia was stable but still feverish. They were starting IV antibiotics just in case. Around 4 a.m., a nurse finally came out to say Daniel could see her. "Just family," the nurse added, glancing at Elena. "She's..." Daniel started, then stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. "I'll wait here," Elena said softly, letting go of his hand. "Go see your daughter." Daniel found Mia in a small room, hooked up to monitors and an IV, but her eyes were open and clear. "Daddy?" she said, her voice hoarse but present, and Daniel had to press his fist against his mouth to keep from sobbing. "Hey, baby girl," he managed, sitting carefully on the edge of her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Mia said, "and my head still hurts. But the medicine is helping, I think." "That's good. That's really good." Mia was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Is the pretty lady here?" Daniel's heart skipped. "What pretty lady?" "From your phone," Mia said. "The one you look at sometimes, the boss lady." Of course she'd noticed. Kids noticed everything. "Her name is Elena," Daniel said carefully. "And yes, she's here. She came to keep Daddy company while you were getting better." "That's nice of her," Mia said, then yawned hugely. "Can I meet her?" "Maybe when you're feeling better," Daniel hedged. "Right now you need to rest." But Mia was already drifting off again, her small hand curled around Daniel's fingers, and he sat there watching her breathe until the sky started to lighten outside the window. The diagnosis came at 7 a.m., a severe case of influenza that had temporarily affected Mia's neurological function, causing the high fever and altered consciousness. Scary, but treatable. She'd need to stay in the hospital for a day or two for monitoring and IV fluids, but the doctor was confident she'd make a full recovery. Daniel cried then, great heaving sobs of relief and exhaustion and gratitude. When he finally pulled himself together enough to go back to the waiting room, he found Elena exactly where he'd left her, now with 2 cups of terrible hospital coffee and a stuffed elephant that she'd apparently sweet-talked from the gift shop before it opened. "She's okay," Daniel said, and Elena stood up so fast she nearly spilled the coffee. "It's the flu. A bad case, but she's going to be okay." Elena set down the coffee and hugged him, just wrapped her arms around him and held on tight while Daniel shook with leftover fear and relief. "Thank you for coming," he said into her hair. "Thank you for being here." "Where else would I be?" Elena asked simply. And that was when Daniel knew. When he absolutely, completely knew that this wasn't just dating, wasn't just seeing where things went. This was something real, something that mattered, something worth fighting for. "Mia wants to meet you," he said, pulling back slightly. "When she's feeling better. She asked about you." Elena's eyes went wide. She knows about me? Apparently she's more observant than I gave her credit for, Daniel admitted. She called you the pretty lady from my phone. Elena looked genuinely flustered. Daniel, are you sure? I don't want to confuse her or upset her or… I'm sure, Daniel said, but only if you want to. No pressure. Elena touched his face gently, her thumb brushing away the last trace of tears. I want to, she said softly. I really want to meet her. So 2 days later, when Mia was feeling well enough to be annoyed by the hospital food and demanding to go home, Elena came by with the stuffed elephant and a picture book about a brave little girl who went on adventures. Daniel introduced them carefully, watching Mia's face for any sign of discomfort or confusion. Mia, this is Elena. She's a friend of mine from work. The pretty lady, Mia said immediately, and Elena blushed. Hi, Mia, Elena said, sitting carefully in the chair beside the bed. I brought you something. I hope you like elephants. Mia accepted the stuffed animal with delight, immediately naming it Peanut. Thank you. Daddy, can Elena read me the book? Daniel glanced at Elena, who nodded. I'd love to, she said. And so Daniel stood there, his heart in his throat, watching Elena read to his daughter about adventures and bravery, watching Mia's eyes light up at the silly voices Elena made, watching the two most important people in his life connect like it was the most natural thing in the world. When Mia finally dozed off mid-story, Elena carefully closed the book and looked up at Daniel with something like wonder in her eyes. She's amazing, Elena whispered. She really is, Daniel agreed. They were still standing there, smiling at each other like idiots, when someone cleared their throat from the doorway. Daniel turned to find Marcus Chen standing there, still in his work clothes, holding a balloon that said, "Get well soon." And from the expression on Marcus's face, he'd seen everything. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, the cheerful balloon bobbing above his head in stark contrast to the shock written across his face. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Then Marcus's eyes traveled from Elena to Daniel to sleeping Mia and back again, and Daniel watched his colleague's expression shift from surprise to understanding to something that looked almost like concern. I should go, Elena said quietly, already standing. Mia needs her rest, and you have company. Elena, Daniel started, but she was already moving toward the door, squeezing his hand once as she passed. A brief touch. Nothing inappropriate, but Marcus saw it. Of course he saw it. It was nice to meet you, Mia, Elena said softly to the sleeping child, then nodded at Marcus. Marcus, good to see you. Ms. Cross, Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral, and Elena slipped past him into the hallway. Daniel wanted to follow her, to explain, to make sure she was okay, but Mia was asleep in the hospital bed behind him, and Marcus was still standing there with that balloon and too many questions in his eyes. So, Marcus said finally, setting the balloon on the windowsill, how long has that been going on? Daniel ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion and stress making his thoughts slow. It's not what you think. Really? Because what I think is that you and Elena Cross are involved somehow, and you've been keeping it quiet. Am I wrong? No, Daniel admitted, because there was no point in lying now. You're not wrong, but it's complicated. Marcus moved further into the room, lowering his voice. Daniel, man, I like you. You're a good guy, a great dad, and you're damn good at your job. But Elena Cross, the CEO, do you have any idea what kind of risk you're taking? I know exactly what kind of risk I'm taking, Daniel said, his voice sharper than intended. You think I haven't thought about this? About what could happen if it goes wrong? Then why are you doing it? Marcus demanded. You've got Mia to think about. You've got your career. Is it really worth risking all of that for what? Daniel interrupted. For a chance to be happy? For the first time in 3 years to feel like maybe I'm not just surviving anymore? Yes, Marcus, it's worth it. Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying Daniel's face. You're in love with her, he said finally, and it wasn't a question. Daniel hadn't let himself think the word yet, hadn't let himself go that far, but hearing Marcus say it out loud, he couldn't deny it. Yeah, he said softly. I think I am. Does she feel the same way? I think so. I hope so. Daniel glanced at Mia, still sleeping peacefully despite the conversation happening around her. She showed up here at 2 in the morning when I called. She's been here every day since. She brought Mia a stuffed elephant and read to her like it was the most natural thing in the world. So yeah, I think she feels the same way. Marcus sighed, pulling up the chair Elena had vacated. Okay, I hear you. But Daniel, you need to understand something. There are people at Sterling who would use this against Elena in a heartbeat. People who've been waiting for her to make a mistake, to show weakness, to give them an opening. We restructured the reporting line, Daniel said. She's not my direct supervisor anymore. We did everything by the book. The reporting line doesn't matter to people looking for ammunition, Marcus said bluntly. She's still the CEO. You're still her employee. And if the wrong person finds out and decides to make an issue of it, it won't matter how ethical you've been. The optics alone could be devastating. Daniel felt his stomach drop. He'd known this, of course. He and Elena had talked about it. But hearing it laid out so starkly made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Are you going to say something? Daniel asked. To HR or the board or… No, Marcus said immediately. I'm not going to say anything. You're both adults, you're being as responsible as you can be, and honestly, I've never seen Elena happy before. Not really happy. And that morning at the gala when you said you were leaving early, she watched you go like… He stopped, shook his head. Look, I'm not going to be the one to ruin that, but I am going to tell you to be careful, more careful than you've already been. We are being careful, Daniel insisted. We haven't told anyone. We don't interact outside of work unless it's completely private. We're not doing anything that could be considered inappropriate. Except being here, Marcus pointed out, in a hospital room, with your daughter. That's not exactly keeping things separate. Mia was sick, Daniel said, his voice hard. Elena came because I needed someone, and she cares about us. I'm not going to apologize for that. Marcus held up his hands. I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying that moments like this, when the personal and professional overlap, that's when things get risky. That's when someone notices something they shouldn't. Daniel knew Marcus was right, but it didn't make the truth any easier to swallow. He'd called Elena at 2 in the morning because she was the person he needed, the person he trusted, the person whose voice could calm the panic threatening to swallow him whole. How was he supposed to keep those worlds separate when they were already so tangled together? I'll talk to her, Daniel said finally. We'll figure out how to be more careful. Marcus nodded, then stood and clapped Daniel gently on the shoulder. For what it's worth, I hope it works out. You both deserve to be happy. Just watch your backs, okay? Okay, Daniel agreed, and Marcus left the balloon and headed for the door. Marcus? Daniel called, and his colleague turned back. Thank you for being a friend. Always, Marcus said, and he meant it. After Marcus left, Daniel sat in the chair beside Mia's bed and watched his daughter sleep. The stuffed elephant, Peanut, was tucked under her arm, and there was a small smile on her face despite the IV still taped to her hand. She'd liked Elena, really liked her. And Elena had been so gentle with her, so natural, reading that story with different voices and making Mia giggle even though she was sick and tired. It had felt right. Like a glimpse of what their life could be if they could just navigate all the complications standing in their way. Daniel pulled out his phone and texted Elena. Are you okay? Her response came a minute later. I'm fine. How's Mia? Still sleeping. Marcus knows. There was a longer pause before her next message appeared. I figured, is he going to be a problem? No, but he's worried. Says we need to be more careful. He's right. We've been getting sloppy. Daniel stared at that message, his chest tight. Meeting your daughter while she's in the hospital is sloppy? No, that was the right thing to do. But Daniel, if Marcus noticed, other people might too. We need to be smarter about this. What does that mean? It means we need to cool things off for a while, at least visibly. Give people less to notice. Daniel's hands were shaking as he typed, Are you breaking up with me? No, God no. But we need to think about the long game here, about protecting what we have by pretending we don't have it, by being strategic. I know it's hard. But Daniel, if this blows up the wrong way, we both lose. You could lose your job. I could lose the company. Is that what you want? Daniel knew she was being logical, being smart, thinking about all the angles the way she always did. But logic didn't change the fact that it hurt, reading those words, feeling the distance already opening up between them. "No," he typed back, "that's not what I want. But I don't know how to do this, how to care about you this much and pretend I don't. We'll figure it out, together, I promise." "Okay," Daniel sent, even though it didn't feel okay at all. Mia woke up a few minutes later, groggy and asking for water. Daniel helped her drink, smoothed her hair back from her forehead, and told her that Elena had to leave but that she'd said goodbye. "I like her," Mia said sleepily. "She's nice, and she does good voices." "She is nice," Daniel agreed. "And yes, very good voices." "Are you going to marry her?" Mia asked, with the kind of blunt directness only a 5-year-old could manage. Daniel nearly choked. "What? Sweetheart, where did that come from?" "You look at her the way you look at Mommy in the pictures," Mia said matter-of-factly, "all smiley and happy, and she looked at you the same way, so I thought maybe you were going to marry her." Daniel sat down carefully on the edge of the bed, his heart hammering. "Would that be okay with you? If someday, maybe, Elena and I decided to be together like that?" Mia considered this seriously. "Would she be my new mommy?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "Nobody could ever replace your mommy. But she could be someone who cares about you very much. Someone who would be part of our family." "Like a bonus person?" Mia asked. "Exactly like a bonus person," Daniel said, smiling despite the ache in his chest. "Then I think it would be okay," Mia decided. "But Daddy, you should probably take her on some dates first. That's what people do on TV before they get married." Daniel laughed, pulling his daughter into a careful hug. "You're absolutely right. Dates first. Good thinking." They brought Mia home the next day with strict instructions to rest and plenty of fluids. Mrs. Chen came by with homemade soup, and Sarah's parents called to check in, offering to take Mia for the weekend once she was feeling better to give Daniel a break. Work was strange without Elena there. Or rather, Elena was there, but they were back to being scrupulously professional. Polite good mornings in the hallway, brief project updates in meetings, carefully neutral emails. To anyone watching, they were exactly what they were supposed to be, CEO and employee, nothing more. It was killing Daniel slowly. 2 weeks after Mia came home from the hospital, Daniel was working late on quarterly projections when his desk phone rang. Internal extension from the executive floor. "Brooks," he answered. "Daniel, it's Elena. Can you come up to my office? There's something we need to discuss." Her voice was professional, cool, giving nothing away, but it was 8:30 at night and most of the building was empty. "I'll be right up," Daniel said. He found Elena standing at her usual spot by the windows, but when she turned to face him, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the worry in her eyes. "Close the door," she said quietly. Daniel did, his stomach already sinking. "What's wrong?" "There's been a complaint," Elena said, her voice carefully controlled. "Filed with HR this afternoon, anonymous, alleging that I've been showing you preferential treatment, that the restructure was designed to facilitate an inappropriate relationship, and that I've been using my position to—" She stopped, closed her eyes. "To coerce you into a relationship." Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. "That's insane. You haven't coerced me into anything. The restructure made sense for the department, and we've been completely professional at work." "I know that," Elena said. "And you know that. But HR is required to investigate any complaint about executive conduct, especially one involving potential abuse of power. They've already scheduled interviews for early next week." "Who filed it?" Daniel demanded. "Marcus wouldn't do that. He said he wouldn't say anything." "It wasn't Marcus," Elena said. "I believe him when he says he's on our side. But someone noticed something. Maybe someone saw us together at the hospital. Maybe someone picked up on the way we look at each other in meetings. It doesn't matter how they know. What matters is that they're using it against us." Daniel moved closer, wanting to touch her, to offer comfort, but he stopped himself. Even here, alone in her office, they had to be careful. "What happens now?" "Now we cooperate fully with the investigation," Elena said. "We answer their questions honestly. We provide documentation of the restructure decision. We demonstrate that everything we've done has been above board. But we have been together, Daniel pointed out. We can't lie about that. No, we can't, Elena agreed. But we can be strategic about how we frame it. The relationship started after the restructure was implemented. We've maintained professional boundaries at work. We've done nothing that could constitute a conflict of interest. Except fall in love with each other, Daniel said quietly. Elena's expression softened slightly. That's not against any policy. Employees are allowed to have personal relationships as long as they don't interfere with professional judgment. Do you really believe they'll see it that way? Daniel asked. Or are they going to decide that the CEO dating anyone who works here is automatically a conflict of interest? Elena didn't answer, which was answer enough. I should resign, Daniel said, the words tasting like ash. Before the investigation concludes. It would make everything cleaner. No, Elena said sharply. Absolutely not. That would make us look guilty, like we had something to hide. Don't we? Daniel challenged. We've been hiding this for weeks. We've been private, Elena corrected. There's a difference between privacy and deception. We haven't lied to anyone. We just haven't broadcast our personal business to the entire company. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, frustration and fear warring inside him. This is exactly what I was afraid of. This is why I said we should be careful. We were careful, Elena insisted. Someone is trying to manufacture a scandal where there isn't one. We can't let them win. And what about Mia? Daniel asked, his voice breaking slightly. If this turns into a public thing, if there are rumors and gossip, she'll hear about it. Kids at school talk, parents talk. How do I protect her from that? Elena's composure finally cracked. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know how to protect her. I don't know how to protect any of us. But Daniel, I am not going to let them destroy what we have. I'm not going to let them make you lose your job or make me lose the company my father built. We're going to fight this. Together? Daniel asked. Together, Elena confirmed, and she finally crossed the distance between them, taking his hands in hers. I meant what I said before. I'm in this. All the way. No matter what it costs. Daniel wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that they could survive this, that love and honesty would be enough. But he'd learned the hard way that life didn't always work out the way you hoped, that sometimes you could do everything right and still lose. Okay, he said anyway, because what else could he say? Okay, we'll fight. The first interview was scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early, wearing his best suit like armor, and sat in the HR waiting area trying not to look as terrified as he felt. Jennifer Martinez, the head of HR, called him in promptly at 9. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a reputation for being both fair and thorough. Daniel, thank you for coming in, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. I want to start by assuring you that this investigation is about getting to the truth, not about punishing anyone. You're not in trouble. We just need to understand the nature of your relationship with Ms. Cross. I understand, Daniel said, his voice steadier than he felt. Jennifer opened a file on her desk. Let's start with the basics. When did you first begin a romantic relationship with Elena Cross? Daniel took a breath. About 6 weeks ago, after the department restructure was implemented. And before the restructure, was there any romantic or sexual contact between you and Ms. Cross? There was an incident, Daniel admitted, and he saw Jennifer's expression sharpen. At the autumn gala, about 2 months ago, Elena had been drinking and we almost kissed, but I stopped it. I told her that if she were sober, I would be the one to make the first move, but that nothing could happen while she was my direct supervisor. And did Ms. Cross retaliate against you for rejecting her advance? Jennifer asked. No, Daniel said firmly. Absolutely not. She apologized the next day. We agreed to maintain strict professional boundaries. But those boundaries eventually changed, Jennifer observed. After the restructure was implemented, Daniel repeated. After she was no longer my direct supervisor. We started seeing each other privately, outside of work. We've maintained completely professional conduct in the office. Jennifer made notes, her expression neutral. Did Ms. Cross discuss the restructure with you before it was implemented? She mentioned that she was considering organizational changes for the finance department, Daniel said. But the restructure made sense from a business perspective. Marcus was ready for more responsibility, and the department had grown large enough to need split management. But you don't deny that the restructure also conveniently removed the direct reporting relationship that was preventing you from dating. Daniel felt his temper flare. It wasn't convenient. It was ethical. Elena restructured the department so that if we decided to pursue a relationship, it wouldn't be a violation of company policy. Some might argue that using her position as CEO to restructure the company in order to date an employee is itself a violation, Jennifer said gently. Then some people would be wrong, Daniel said, trying to keep his voice level. Elena has never used her position to pressure me into anything. Every decision we've made has been mutual and consensual. Jennifer asked more questions about the timeline, about specific interactions, about whether Elena had ever given him preferential treatment in terms of assignments or promotions. Daniel answered as honestly as he could, aware that every word was being recorded, every detail scrutinized. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, Jennifer closed her file. Thank you for your cooperation, Daniel. I know this isn't easy. Just one more question. Do you believe Miss Cross has behaved unethically in her conduct toward you? No, Daniel said without hesitation. Elena is one of the most ethical people I've ever met. She restructured the department specifically to avoid any conflict of interest. She's been nothing but professional at work. And our relationship it's real. It's not some abuse of power. It's just two people who care about each other trying to do the right thing. Jennifer's expression softened slightly. I believe you, she said, but I'm not the only one who needs to be convinced. The board will review our findings and make a final determination. Daniel left the interview feeling wrung out and anxious. Elena was scheduled for her interview that afternoon, and he sent her a text letting her know how his had gone. She responded with a simple thank you. I'll call you tonight. But she didn't call that night, or the next night. By Wednesday, Daniel was starting to panic, leaving voicemails that went unreturned, sending texts that were answered with only brief acknowledgments. Thursday morning, he arrived at work to find Marcus waiting by his desk, his expression grim. Conference room, Marcus said quietly. Now. Daniel followed him into the small conference room they used for private discussions, his heart pounding. What's going on? There's been a development, Marcus said, closing the door. Someone leaked the investigation to the press. There's an article in the business section this morning suggesting that Elena Cross is having an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate employee. Daniel felt the world tilt. They named me? Not by name, Marcus said, but there are enough details that anyone who works here could probably figure it out. And Daniel, the article quotes anonymous sources saying that Elena visited you at the hospital when your daughter was sick, that she's been seen leaving your apartment building, that the restructure was suspiciously timed. Someone's been following us, Daniel said, his voice hollow. Someone's been watching. Looks that way, Marcus confirmed. And whoever it is, they're determined to take Elena down. This isn't just about company policy anymore. This is about destroying her reputation. Daniel sank into a chair, his mind racing. Mia, I need to pull her out of school. If reporters start showing up, if other kids start talking... Already thought of that, Marcus said. I called Sarah's parents. They're on their way to pick her up now. Mrs. Chen is meeting them at the school. Daniel looked up, gratitude and fear warring in his chest. Thank you. Marcus, Don't thank me yet, Marcus interrupted. There's more. The board called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. They're going to discuss Elena's future with the company. They're going to fire her, Daniel said numbly. Because of me. Because she dared to have feelings for someone who works here. We don't know that, Marcus said, but his tone suggested he thought that's exactly what was going to happen. Daniel stood abruptly. I have to see her. I have to talk to her. She's not here, Marcus said. She left early this morning. Her assistant said she had personal business to attend to. Personal business. Elena was preparing to fight for her company, her reputation, everything she'd built. And she was doing it alone because Daniel was the reason she was in this mess in the first place. He pulled out his phone and called her. It went straight to voicemail. Elena, it's me. I heard about the article, about the board meeting. Please call me. Please let me help. I can't let you go through this alone. He hung up and immediately called again. Voicemail again. "I'm resigning," he said to the recording. "Effective immediately. I'll put it in writing. I'll tell the board it was all my fault. I'll do whatever it takes to protect you. Just please call me back." He sent the same message via text, then email. Nothing. The day crawled by in agonizing slowness. Daniel tried to work, tried to focus on spreadsheets and projections, but his hand shook too much to type properly. At 3 p.m., word spread through the office that the board meeting had concluded. At 3:15, Elena's assistant sent an all-staff email. Effective immediately, Elena Cross is taking a leave of absence from her position as CEO while the board conducts a comprehensive review of recent allegations. CFO Robert Henshaw will serve as interim CEO. All questions should be directed to the communications department. Daniel read the email 3 times, each word feeling like a knife. Leave of absence. Review of allegations. Interim CEO. They were pushing her out, maybe not firing her outright, but pushing her out all the same. And it was his fault. He was typing out his resignation letter when his desk phone rang. Elena's personal cell number on the caller ID. "Elena," he answered immediately. "Where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm at home," Elena said, and her voice was raw, like she'd been crying. "Daniel, we need to talk. Can you come over?" "I'm on my way," Daniel said, already grabbing his coat. He made it to her apartment in record time, breaking at least 3 traffic laws in the process. Elena answered the door looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. No power suit, no perfect hair and makeup, just jeans and a sweatshirt and eyes red from crying. "I'm so sorry," Daniel said the moment he saw her. "Elena, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault." "Stop," Elena said, pulling him inside and closing the door. "This is not your fault. None of this is your fault." "They're forcing you out because of me," Daniel said, "because you cared about me. I should have known better. I should have stayed away from you." Elena took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Listen to me. I don't regret a single moment of what we've had. Not one. What I regret is that there are people cruel enough and vindictive enough to use it against us." "Who?" Daniel demanded. "Who's doing this?" "Robert Henshaw," Elena said bitterly. "My father's old CFO. The one who thought he should have gotten the CEO position when my father retired. He's been waiting for an opportunity like this for years." The complaint, Daniel realized. He filed it. "Can't prove it," Elena said, "but the timing, the level of detail, the leak to the press, it all points to him. He's been building a case against me, gathering evidence, waiting for the perfect moment to strike." "So what do we do?" Daniel asked. "How do we fight this?" Elena dropped her hands, moving away from him to stand by her windows. Always the windows. "The board gave me an ultimatum," she said quietly. "Take a leave of absence and cooperate with their review, or they'll call a vote of no confidence and remove me outright. They said if I can prove that my relationship with you hasn't affected my judgment or compromised the company, they might let me come back." "Then we'll prove it," Daniel said. "We'll show them the restructure documents, the performance reviews, everything that demonstrates we've been professional." "It won't matter," Elena said, her voice defeated. "They've already made up their minds. This leave of absence is just a polite way of pushing me out. In 3 months, maybe 6, they'll announce that I'm stepping down permanently for personal reasons, and Robert will become the permanent CEO." "No," Daniel said fiercely. "I won't let that happen. I'll resign right now. I'll make a statement saying I pursued you, that you did everything right, that—" "Daniel, stop," Elena interrupted, turning to face him. "Your resignation won't change anything. It might even make things worse, make it look like we're trying to cover something up." "Then what?" Daniel asked desperately. "I can't just stand here and watch them destroy you. Tell me what to do." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "There's nothing to do. They've won. Robert's won, and Her voice broke. "I need to let you go." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. "What?" "I need to let you go," Elena repeated, tears streaming down her face now. "Being with me has already cost you so much. Your privacy, your reputation, your daughter's peace. I can't keep asking you to sacrifice more." "That's my choice to make," Daniel said, moving toward her. "Elena, I love you. I'm not walking away just because things got hard. I love you too, Elena sobbed. That's why I have to do this. That's why I have to protect you and Mia from the fallout of being associated with me. Don't you see? As long as we're together, you'll always be the subordinate employee who slept his way into the CEO's bed. And Mia will always be the daughter of that man. I can't do that to you. I won't. You're not doing anything to us, Daniel insisted, pulling her into his arms despite her protests. They're doing this. Robert Henshaw and whoever else wants to see you fail. But Elena, we can survive this. Together. How? Elena asked against his chest. How do we survive this? I've lost my company. You might lose your job. And Mia, what happens when she goes back to school and the other kids have heard their parents gossiping? What happens when she asks you why people are saying mean things about her daddy and the pretty lady? Daniel held her tighter, his own eyes burning. Then I'll tell her the truth, that sometimes people are cruel to those who dare to be happy, and that we didn't do anything wrong. But we did, Elena whispered. We knew the risks, and we did it anyway. We fell in love, Daniel corrected gently. We found each other in the middle of our messy, complicated lives, and we dared to build something beautiful. That's not wrong, Elena. That's the bravest thing either of us has ever done. They stood there in her apartment, holding each other while the city lights flickered on below, and Daniel felt Elena's resolve crumbling, felt her lean into him instead of pulling away, felt her hands grip his shirt like she was drowning, and he was the only thing keeping her afloat. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. I don't know how to make this right. We'll figure it out, Daniel promised. We'll find a way. But Elena, we have to do it together. I can't lose you. I won't. Even if it costs you everything? Elena asked, pulling back to look at him. You are everything, Daniel said simply, and he meant it with his whole heart. Elena kissed him then, desperate and tear-stained and full of all the fear and love and hope they'd been holding back. And Daniel kissed her back, pouring 3 years of grief and 6 weeks of joy and a lifetime of possible tomorrows into the touch of his lips against hers. When they finally broke apart, Elena rested her forehead against his. I wrote my resignation letter, she whispered. It's on my desk. I was going to submit it tomorrow. Don't, Daniel said firmly. Not yet. Give me a chance to fix this. You can't fix this, Elena said. No one can. But Daniel was already thinking, already planning. There had to be a way to fight back, to prove that Elena had done nothing wrong, to show the board and the company and the world that their relationship was built on respect and love, not manipulation or abuse of power. And he thought he knew exactly where to start. Daniel left Elena's apartment at midnight with a plan forming in his mind and her resignation letter folded in his jacket pocket. She'd given it to him reluctantly, made him promise not to destroy it, but agreed to hold off submitting it for 48 hours. 2 days to find a way to fight back. 2 days to save everything they'd built. It wasn't much, but it was something. He spent the entire subway ride home making lists on his phone, calling in favors he hadn't known he had. By the time he walked through his apartment door, Mrs. Chen was asleep on his couch, and Mia was tucked safely in her bed, her new elephant clutched tight. Daniel stood in the doorway of his daughter's room for a long moment, watching her breathe, and felt the weight of what he was about to do settle over him. If this went wrong, he wouldn't just lose his job. He'd lose any chance of finding another one in this industry. He'd be the guy who tried to bring down a CEO, the troublemaker, the liability. But if he did nothing, Elena would resign. She'd walk away from the company she'd spent a decade building, and she'd do it believing she was protecting him and Mia. She'd sacrifice her dreams to keep them safe, and Daniel would spend the rest of his life knowing he'd let her. That wasn't acceptable. He woke Mrs. Chen gently, thanked her for staying, and promised to explain everything soon. Then he sat at his kitchen table with his laptop and started writing. Not a resignation letter this time, but something else entirely. A statement. A manifesto. The truth. By 3 a.m., he had a draft. By 5 a.m., he'd refined it into something that felt right. Honest without being defensive, clear without being accusatory, personal without being inappropriate. He read it over one more time, his finger hovering over the send button on his email client. The recipient list was extensive. The Sterling Industries Board of Directors, the HR department, every VP and department head, and a carefully selected list of business journalists who'd covered Elena's rise to CEO. This would be public, irreversible. The moment he hit send, there would be no going back. Daniel thought about Sarah, about what she'd say if she could see him now. She'd probably tell him he was being reckless, that he should think about Mia first, that protecting their stability mattered more than grand gestures. But she'd also told Mia that he deserved to be happy, that he should find someone who knew how good he was. He hit send. The email went out at 5:43 a.m. on a Friday morning. By 6:15, Daniel's phone was ringing off the hook. He ignored the calls, focusing instead on getting Mia ready for school. Sarah's parents had offered to keep her longer, but Daniel wanted her routine to be as normal as possible. Wanted her to know that even when things got scary, they kept going. "Daddy, your phone won't stop buzzing," Mia observed over her cereal. "Is it work?" "Something like that," Daniel said, silencing the device entirely. "Hey, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something." Mia looked up, instantly alert to the serious tone in his voice. "Am I in trouble?" "No, baby. Not at all." Daniel sat down across from her, trying to figure out how to explain this in terms a 5-year-old would understand. "You know how sometimes people say things that aren't very nice, things that might hurt someone's feelings?" Mia nodded solemnly. "Like when Tyler said my drawing was ugly, but Miss Peterson said he was just being mean because he was having a bad day." "Exactly like that," Daniel said. "Well, some people have been saying not nice things about Elena and me, things that aren't true, and I sent a letter this morning telling everyone the real story." "What did the letter say?" Mia asked. Daniel chose his words carefully. "It said that Elena is my friend, and that we care about each other very much, and that even though some people think that's wrong because she's my boss, we didn't do anything bad. We fell in love. And love isn't bad, even when it's complicated." Mia thought about this for a moment. "So you do want to marry her?" Daniel couldn't help but smile. "Maybe someday, if she'll have me. But first we have to get through this hard part." "The part where people are being mean like Tyler?" Mia asked. "Exactly like that," Daniel confirmed. Mia reached across the table and patted his hand with her small one. "It's okay, Daddy. Miss Peterson says mean people are just scared on the inside. Maybe the people being mean to you and Elena are just scared too." Out of the mouths of babes, Daniel thought, his heart swelling with love for his impossibly wise daughter. "You're probably right, sweetheart. You're very smart. You know that?" "I know," Mia said matter-of-factly, making Daniel laugh despite everything. He walked her to school, ignoring the curious looks from other parents who'd probably already seen the news. One mother he vaguely recognized from PTA meetings approached him in the hallway, her expression sympathetic. "I read the article this morning," she said quietly. "The one you wrote. I think it was very brave." "Thank you," Daniel managed, surprised. "My sister went through something similar at her company," the woman continued. "Office romance, power dynamics, all of it. It's not easy. But she and her partner have been married for 8 years now, so it can work out." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. "I appreciate that." "Really?" He made it back to his apartment and finally checked his phone. 53 missed calls, 87 new emails, and one text message from Elena, sent at 6 a.m. "What did you do?" He called her immediately. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me you didn't send what I think you sent," Elena said, her voice tight with panic. "I sent a statement," Daniel said calmly, "to the board, to HR, and to the press, explaining our relationship, the timeline, and making it very clear that you've acted with complete integrity throughout." "Daniel, you can't unilaterally decide to make this public." "You were going to resign," Daniel said. "You were going to walk away from everything you've built because you thought it would protect me. I couldn't let you do that." "So instead you've made yourself a target," Elena said, and he could hear the fear beneath her anger. "Do you have any idea what the board is going to do? What Robert Henshaw is going to do with this?" "I know exactly what they're going to do," Daniel said. "They're going to call me in for a meeting. They're going to threaten me, try to intimidate me, maybe fire me outright. But Elena, I put everything in that statement. The dates, the restructure documentation, Marcus's testimony that the organizational changes made business sense. I made it impossible for them to claim you coerced me or manipulated me without calling me a liar. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, very quietly, Elena said, "You testified? Marcus testified?" "He called me at 7 this morning," Daniel said, "after he read my statement. He said he'd already sent his own letter to the board confirming that the restructure was justified and that he'd witnessed nothing but professional conduct from both of us at work. He's putting his own credibility on the line to back us up." Elena made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You're both idiots, brave, wonderful idiots." "We're fighting for you," Daniel said simply, "the way you'd fight for us." "I don't deserve you," Elena whispered. "Yes, you do," Daniel said firmly. "You deserve to keep the company you built. You deserve to be happy, and you deserve someone who's willing to stand up and tell the truth, even when it's terrifying." "What did you say?" Elena asked. "In the statement, what exactly did you tell them?" Daniel pulled up the email on his laptop, reading sections aloud. "I told them that I fell in love with you not because of your position or power, but because of who you are when no one's watching. I told them about the gala, about how you apologized and we established boundaries. I told them about the restructure and how it was your idea to remove the direct reporting relationship before we pursued anything personal. I told them about Mia getting sick and how you showed up at 2 in the morning, not as my boss, but as someone who cared. And I told them that if loving you is grounds for termination, then they should fire me because I'm not going to stop." Elena was crying now. He could hear it in her breathing. "You can't say things like that. You can't. Daniel, you need this job." "I need you more," Daniel said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "I need Mia to grow up seeing that her father doesn't run away when things get hard. I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror and know I did the right thing. And I need you to understand that you're worth fighting for." "I'm going to the office," Elena said suddenly, her voice steadying. "If you're going down fighting, then so am I. I'm not hiding in my apartment while you face the board alone." "Elena, you're on leave." "I don't care," she interrupted. "They want to review my conduct? Fine. Let's review it. Let's lay everything out in the open and let them see that we've done nothing wrong. Are you with me?" Daniel smiled, feeling hope bloom in his chest for the first time in days. "Always." "Then meet me at Sterling in 1 hour," Elena said. "And Daniel, thank you for being brave enough for both of us." The Sterling Industries boardroom was exactly as intimidating as Daniel remembered from his one previous visit during his initial hiring process. Massive mahogany table, leather chairs that probably cost more than his monthly rent, windows overlooking the city like a declaration of power. Today, those windows felt less like a symbol of success and more like a reminder of how far there was to fall. Elena sat at the head of the table in her usual spot, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like armor. Her hair was pulled back severely, her makeup perfect, every inch the CEO except for the slight tremor in her hands that only Daniel could see from where he sat 3 chairs down. The board members filed in one by one, 8 men and 2 women, most of them old enough to be Elena's parents, all of them wearing expressions that ranged from concerned to openly hostile. Robert Henshaw came in last, settling into the chair directly across from Elena with a smile that made Daniel's skin crawl. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Elena began, her voice steady and professional. "I know we have a lot to discuss." "That's an understatement," said Gerald Morrison, the board chairman and one of her father's oldest friends. "Elena, what were you thinking? A public statement about your personal life? This is a disaster." "With respect, Gerald, the disaster was the anonymous complaint and the leak to the press," Elena said calmly. "Daniel's statement was simply setting the record straight. By confirming that you're involved with an employee," Robert Henshaw interjected smoothly, "an employee who directly benefited from an organizational restructure you implemented. How is that setting anything straight?" "The restructure was implemented before our relationship began," Daniel said, speaking up for the first time. All eyes turned to him, and he forced himself to meet their gazes steadily, and it made legitimate business sense. Marcus Chen can attest to that, as can the performance metrics from the finance department. "Mr. Brooks, while we appreciate your input, this meeting is primarily to address Ms. Cross's conduct," Morrison said, not unkindly. My conduct is directly tied to his, Elena said. You can't review one without the other. So, yes, Daniel stays. There was a moment of tense silence. Then Morrison sighed and nodded. Very well, let's start with the basics. Ms. Cross, when did you first develop romantic feelings for Mr. Brooks? Elena didn't hesitate. About 7 months ago, roughly a month after he started working here. I didn't act on those feelings. I didn't even acknowledge them to myself for a long time. But yes, I was attracted to him. And you didn't think that was a problem? Asked Patricia Wells, one of the two women on the board. Of course I thought it was a problem, Elena said, which is why I maintained strict professional boundaries. Why I made sure our interactions were always appropriate and witnessed by others. Why I restructured the department specifically to remove the direct reporting relationship before considering whether to pursue anything personal. Convenient timing, Robert Henshaw muttered. Elena's eyes flashed. It wasn't convenient, Robert. It was ethical. And before you accuse me of manipulating the organization for personal gain, perhaps you should explain why you waited until now to raise concerns about my leadership. Could it possibly be because you've been waiting for an opportunity to undermine me ever since you lost the CEO position to me 7 years ago? The room went very quiet. Robert's face flushed red. That's a serious accusation, Morrison said carefully. It's the truth, Elena said. Robert has opposed nearly every major decision I've made since becoming CEO. He's questioned my judgment in board meetings, undermined my authority with investors, and actively recruited board members to his side. This complaint wasn't about protecting the company from inappropriate behavior. It was about finding ammunition to force me out. You can't prove that, Robert said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Actually, I can, Marcus Chen said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see him standing there, a folder in his hands. Sorry I'm late, traffic was terrible. Morrison frowned. Mr. Chen, this is a closed board meeting. With respect, sir, I'm the VP who took over Daniel's direct supervision after the restructure. If we're reviewing whether that restructure was legitimate, you need to hear from me. Marcus moved into the room without waiting for permission, setting the folder on the table. These are the performance reports from the finance department for the 6 months before and after the restructure. As you'll see, productivity increased by 17%. Error rates decreased by 12%, and employee satisfaction scores went up across the board. The restructure worked exactly as intended. That doesn't address the question of motivation, Patricia Wells pointed out. No, it doesn't, Marcus agreed. But it does prove that even if Elena's motivation was partially personal, the business outcome was positive. She made a decision that benefited the company while also resolving a potential ethics issue. That's not abuse of power, that's good leadership. Daniel watched the board members exchange glances, saw some of the hostility start to fade from their expressions. Morrison was frowning thoughtfully, and even Patricia Wells looked less certain than before. Furthermore, Marcus continued, I've worked with Elena for 8 years. I've seen her make hundreds of decisions, both easy and difficult. Never once has she let personal feelings interfere with her judgment. Never once has she shown favoritism or used her position inappropriately. If anything, she's been harder on the people she cares about, holding them to higher standards than everyone else. Can you prove that? Morrison asked. Look at Daniel's performance reviews, Marcus said. Elena hasn't reviewed him directly since the restructure, but I have. He's been evaluated on the same metrics as everyone else, held to the same standards. If anything, he's had to work harder to prove himself because people assume he's getting special treatment. He's not. He's just genuinely good at his job. Elena was staring at Marcus like she'd never seen him before. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. You're risking your own position by defending us. Marcus smiled slightly. Because it's the right thing to do, and because I'm tired of watching talented people get destroyed by politics and fear. He looked directly at Robert Henshaw. Some of us still believe in integrity. Robert's face was purple now. This is absurd. You're all acting like there's nothing wrong with the CEO dating an employee. What kind of precedent does that set? The precedent that we're human beings with personal lives, Elena said. The precedent that we can be professional and ethical while also allowing ourselves to be happy. Robert, I know you want my job. I've known it for years. But this isn't the way to get it. I don't want your job, Robert protested, but it sounded hollow. Then prove it, Elena challenged. Withdraw your complaint. Admit that this was personal, not professional. Give me the chance to defend myself on the merits of my work, not on who I'm dating. The complaint was anonymous, Robert said stiffly. Was it? Elena pulled out her own folder, sliding it across the table. Because the language in the complaint matches almost word for word an email you sent to Patricia 3 months ago, questioning my judgment after I rejected your proposal to cut R&D funding. The phrasing is distinctive, Robert, almost like the same person wrote both documents. Robert's face went from purple to gray. Patricia Wells pulled the folder toward her, scanning the contents, and her expression hardened. Robert, she said coldly, did you file a false complaint against Elena? It wasn't false, Robert said desperately. She did restructure the department to facilitate a relationship. She did visit Brooks at the hospital. She did everything by the book, Morrison interrupted, his voice heavy with disappointment. She restructured for legitimate business reasons, confirmed by Mr. Chen's testimony. She visited an employee's sick child as a human being showing compassion, not as a CEO abusing power. And she's been nothing but transparent with us today about her relationship. He looked at Elena, and his expression softened. Your father would be proud of how you've handled this. You've been more ethical and thoughtful than many people would have been in your position. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. Thank you, Gerald. That means more than you know. Morrison turned to Robert. As for you, I think it's time we discussed your future with this company. Filing false complaints, undermining the CEO, attempting to manipulate the board, these are serious violations of your duties. You can't fire me for this, Robert said, panic creeping into his voice. Watch us, Patricia Wells said flatly. The board asked Robert to leave while they deliberated. He stood slowly, gathering his things, and on his way out, he paused next to Elena. You won't last, he said quietly, venomously. You think this is over, but it's not. Someone will always be watching, waiting for you to slip. Let them watch, Elena said steadily. I have nothing to hide. Robert left, and the room felt lighter without his presence. Morrison addressed Elena and Daniel together. I think we need to establish some clear guidelines going forward, he said. Not because we doubt your integrity, but because we need to protect both of you and the company from future accusations. What kind of guidelines? Daniel asked. For starters, we'll formalize the conflict of interest policy to explicitly address relationships between executives and employees at different levels of the organization, Morrison said. We'll require disclosure of any such relationships to HR and the board, along with a management plan to prevent any actual conflicts. That seems reasonable, Elena agreed. We'll also want to establish clear boundaries around your professional interactions, Patricia added. No direct supervision, no involvement in performance reviews or compensation decisions for anyone you're personally involved with. Basically, a formalized firewall. Done, Elena said. I'll work with HR to draft the policy myself if needed. Morrison smiled slightly. I don't think that will be necessary. But Elena, I do need to know, are you committed to making this relationship work? Because if this is just a fling, if there's any chance you'll both move on in a few months, it might be easier to end things now rather than go through all of this. Elena looked at Daniel, and he saw everything he felt reflected in her eyes. Fear and hope and determination and love, all mixed together into something beautiful and terrifying. I'm committed, Elena said, still holding Daniel's gaze, completely. So am I, Daniel added. Morrison nodded. Then let's make this official. Ms. Cross, your leave of absence is rescinded effective immediately. Mr. Brooks, you'll continue reporting to Mr. Chen with no changes to your position or compensation. And both of you will meet with HR by end of week to formalize the disclosure and management plan for your relationship. It was over. Just like that, it was over. Elena stood, and Daniel stood with her. They walked out of the boardroom together, not touching, but close enough that their shoulders almost brushed. The moment they were out of sight of the boardroom, Elena grabbed his hand. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. You did it, Daniel corrected. You stood up for yourself, for us. We did it together, Elena insisted. and she pulled him into an empty conference room, closing the door behind them. The kiss was different this time. Not desperate or scared, but triumphant, full of relief and joy and the bone-deep certainty that they'd fought for something worth having and won. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena rested her forehead against Daniel's. "I have something to say," she said. "Something I should have said weeks ago." "What is it?" Elena took a breath. "I love you, Daniel Brooks. I love your integrity and your kindness and the way you love your daughter. I love that you made me believe I could have more than just my career. And I love that when things got scary, you didn't run. You stayed and fought, even when it would have been easier to walk away." Daniel's throat was tight. "I love you too. I love your strength and your intelligence and the way you see the world. I love that you showed up at the hospital at 2 a.m. because I needed you. And I love that you're brave enough to choose happiness even when it's terrifying." "So what now?" Elena asked. "Where do we go from here?" Daniel smiled, pulling her closer. "Now we do this right. No more hiding, no more sneaking around. We tell our friends and families. We go on actual dates in public places. And we build something real, something that lasts." "I want that," Elena said. "I want all of that. But Daniel, I need to know, are you sure? Are you absolutely sure this is what you want? Because once we go public, once everyone knows, there's no going back." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Daniel said. "Except maybe Mia. But you're a very close second." Elena laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound Daniel had ever heard. "I'll take second place to your daughter. That's exactly where I should be." "No," Daniel said seriously. "You're not second place. You're part of the same thing. You're part of what makes life worth living. You and Mia both." Elena kissed him again, softer this time, full of promise. "Take me to meet her," she said. "Properly, I mean. Not in a hospital room, but in your home. Let me see your life, your world. Let me be part of it." "Are you sure?" Daniel asked. "It's messy and chaotic, and there are toys everywhere, and—" "I'm sure," Elena said firmly. "I want the mess. I want the chaos. I want the real life, not the polished version." So that evening, Daniel brought Elena home to his small apartment where Mia was waiting with Mrs. Chen. He'd called ahead to warn them, to make sure Mia was ready, and when they walked through the door, his daughter was practically vibrating with excitement. "You came!" Mia exclaimed, running to Elena. "Daddy said you were coming, but I wasn't sure if you really would." Elena crouched down to Mia's level, her expensive suit wrinkling on the worn carpet, and smiled. "I wouldn't miss it. I brought something for you, if that's okay." She pulled out the book from the hospital, the one about the brave little girl. "I thought maybe we could finish this together, since you fell asleep before we got to the end." Mia's face lit up. "Yes! Can we read it now? Daddy, can Elena stay for dinner?" Daniel looked at Elena, saw the hope and nervousness in her eyes, and smiled. "If she wants to, absolutely." "I want to," Elena said softly. They ordered pizza because Daniel's cooking skills were limited, and Elena admitted she'd never actually made a meal in her life that didn't come from a restaurant or a catering company. They ate at the small kitchen table with Mia between them, and Elena listened with genuine interest as Mia told elaborate stories about her day at school, complete with dramatic reenactments. After dinner, they read the book together on the couch, Mia in the middle, Daniel on one side, Elena on the other. Elena did all the voices again, making Mia giggle and Daniel's heart expand until it felt too big for his chest. When it was time for Mia's bath, Elena offered to help, and Daniel watched from the doorway as she proved surprisingly competent at wrangling a 5-year-old into pajamas and brushing her teeth. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "I'm terrified," Elena admitted, "but she makes it easy." At bedtime, Mia asked if Elena would tuck her in, and Elena looked so honored and overwhelmed that Daniel had to turn away to hide his smile. "Good night, sweetheart," Elena said, pulling the blanket up to Mia's chin. "Thank you for letting me be here tonight." "You can come back any time," Mia said seriously. "Daddy's happier when you're here. He smiles more." Elena glanced at Daniel, her eyes bright. "Then I'll definitely come back." "Good," Mia said, then yawned. "Elena, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If you and Daddy get married, can I call you Mom? Or would that make you sad because you're not my real mom? Elena's breath caught, and Daniel saw tears slip down her cheeks. Oh, sweetheart, I would be honored if you wanted to call me that. So honored. But we don't have to decide anything now, okay? We can take our time and figure out what feels right. Okay, Mia said, already half asleep. But I think I want to, because you're nice and you do good voices and you make Daddy happy. Daniel had to leave the room then, had to press his fist against his mouth to keep from making a sound. Elena found him in the hallway a few minutes later, and they held each other while their daughter, slept peacefully in the next room. Is this real? Elena whispered. Is this really happening? It's real, Daniel promised. This is our life now, messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. And standing there in the narrow hallway of his small apartment, holding the woman he loved while their daughter dreamed, Daniel finally understood what Sarah had meant, what she'd wanted for him. Not just survival, not just getting through each day, but this, love and family, and the courage to build something new from the broken pieces of what came before. This was living, and it was more than he'd ever dared to hope for. The investigation officially closed 3 weeks later with a formal statement from the board exonerating Elena of all allegations and announcing Robert Henshaw's resignation for conduct unbecoming of an executive officer. The business press picked up the story, of course, but the narrative had shifted. Instead of scandal, it was a story about integrity and transparency, about a CEO who'd chosen honesty over expediency. Daniel still got looks in the office, curious glances, whispered conversations that stopped when he walked by, but they felt different now. Less judgmental, more curious. And when Marcus threw his arm around Daniel's shoulders one morning and announced loudly that anyone who had a problem with Daniel or Elena could take it up with him personally, the whispers stopped altogether. Elena returned to work with quiet determination, throwing herself into a new product launch that she claimed would revolutionize the industry. Daniel watched her in meetings, saw the fire back in her eyes, the confidence in her voice, and fell in love with her all over again. But the real shift happened outside the office, in the small moments that built a life together. Elena started coming to dinner at Daniel's apartment twice a week, then 3 times. Then she stopped going home some nights, and Daniel would wake up to find her making coffee in his kitchen, still wearing his old college t-shirt and looking impossibly beautiful in the morning light. I can't make breakfast, she admitted one Saturday morning, staring helplessly at the eggs Daniel had set out. I don't even know where to start. That's okay, Daniel said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. I'll teach you. We have time. And they did have time. For the first time in years, Daniel felt like he had all the time in the world. Time to teach Elena how to make pancakes. Time to watch terrible movies on the couch with Mia between them. Time to build something that felt like forever. Mia adapted to Elena's presence with the easy acceptance of childhood. She started calling her Lena without prompting, a nickname that made Elena's eyes go soft every time she heard it. She dragged Elena to school events and insisted she sit next to Daniel at the winter concert. She drew pictures of the 3 of them together, stick figures holding hands under a too bright sun, and stuck them proudly on the refrigerator. Is this what family looks like now? Mia asked one night as Elena helped her with homework at the kitchen table. Elena glanced at Daniel, who was washing dishes, then back at Mia. I think so. Is that okay with you? It's good, Mia said seriously. I like having you here. It feels right. It feels right to me too, Elena said softly. But not everything was easy. There were moments when Elena's inexperience with children showed, when she spoke to Mia like a small adult instead of a 5-year-old and had to be gently redirected. There were nights when Daniel's grief for Sarah rose up unexpectedly, and he had to explain through tears that loving Elena didn't mean he'd stopped loving his late wife. I know, Elena said, holding him on one of those hard nights. Sarah was your wife, Mia's mother. She'll always be part of your story. I'm not trying to replace her. I'm just trying to be part of what comes next. You are, Daniel promised. You're the best part. They met each other's families over the holidays. Elena's father turned out to be gruff but kind, shaking Daniel's hand with a grip that could crush stone and telling him that anyone who could make his daughter smile like that was all right in his book. Sarah's parents were harder, viewing Elena with obvious skepticism, until Mia climbed into Elena's lap during dinner and started telling her grandmother that Lena was teaching her how to be brave like the girl in their book. She's good for you, Sarah's mother said to Daniel later, her voice thick with emotion. Sarah would have liked her. She would have wanted this for you. Daniel had to excuse himself to the bathroom to pull himself together. The new year brought changes. The board approved Elena's product launch, and suddenly, Sterling Industries was making headlines for innovation instead of scandal. Daniel got promoted to Director of Financial Strategy, a position that Marcus insisted he'd earned entirely on merit, even though the timing felt suspicious. Stop overthinking it, Marcus said when Daniel tried to refuse the promotion. You're good at your job. You've been good at it since day one. The fact that you're dating the CEO doesn't change that. It complicates it, though, Daniel argued. Everything worth having is complicated, Marcus said. Take the promotion. You've earned it. So Daniel took the promotion, and with it came a salary that meant he could finally stop worrying quite so much about money. He could afford a better apartment, could start saving for Mia's college fund, could breathe without constantly calculating how many weeks the savings would last. I want you to move in with me, Elena said one night in February, the words tumbling out over dinner at her apartment. Both of you. I want to wake up with you every morning and come home to you every night. I want to be part of the bedtime routine and the school drop-offs and all the boring, beautiful minutiae of life. Daniel set down his fork carefully. That's a big step. I know, Elena said. And if you're not ready, I understand. But Daniel, I'm ready. I'm so ready to stop living in two separate places and pretending we're not building something permanent here. What about Mia? Daniel asked. This is her home. Everything she remembers of her mother is in that apartment. Then we bring it with us, Elena said simply. The photos, the drawings, the memories. We create a space that honors Sarah while making room for what we're building together. And if Mia's not ready, if she needs more time, then we wait. They asked Mia that weekend, sitting her down at the kitchen table with the seriousness the conversation deserved. How would you feel about moving to a new place? Daniel asked. A bigger place, with your own room and space for all your things? Mia's eyes went wide. With Lena? Yes, with Lena, Elena confirmed. If that's something you'd want. Mia thought about it, her face scrunched in concentration. Would I have to change schools? No, Daniel said. We'd still be in the same neighborhood. You'd go to the same school, see the same friends. And could we bring Mommy's pictures? Elena reached across the table to take Mia's hand. We'd bring everything that's important to you. Your mommy will always be part of our family, sweetheart. Always. Mia nodded slowly. Then I think yes. I think I'd like that. They moved in April into a spacious 3-bedroom apartment in Elena's building with windows that overlooked the park. Mia's room was painted her favorite shade of purple, and they hung Sarah's photos in the hallway where everyone could see them. The living room became a comfortable chaos of Mia's toys and Elena's books and Daniel's worn furniture that Elena insisted they keep because it felt like home. This is good, Elena said one night, standing in the doorway of Mia's room and watching Daniel read bedtime stories. This is everything I didn't know I needed. The scandal became old news, replaced by Sterling's successful product launch, and then by newer, shinier corporate drama at other companies. People stopped asking Daniel what it was like to date the CEO and started asking him for his opinion on financial projections. Elena stopped being introduced as the CEO who dated an employee and went back to being introduced as one of the most innovative tech leaders of her generation. They found their rhythm. Mornings were chaos as they got Mia ready for school. Evenings were homework and dinner and family time. Weekends were a mix of lazy mornings and adventures around the city. Elena learned to make grilled cheese sandwiches and considered it a major accomplishment. Daniel learned to navigate board dinners and investor meetings with the same grace he brought to parent-teacher conferences. But the moment that changed everything came 6 months after they moved in together, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Daniel was working from home, buried in spreadsheets, when his phone rang. Mia's school, calling to say she'd fallen on the playground and needed to be picked up. Nothing serious, just a scraped knee and some tears, but could someone come get her? I'm on my way, Daniel said, already grabbing his keys. I'm closer. Elena's voice came from the doorway. She was home early for once, and she was already putting on her shoes. Let me go. You finish your work. Daniel hesitated. This was parent territory, the kind of thing he'd always handled alone. You don't have to. I want to, Elena said firmly. She's scared and she's hurt and she needs someone. Let me be that someone. So Daniel watched from the window as Elena rushed out, and 40 minutes later she returned with Mia on her hip, the scraped knee bandaged, and Mia's tears dried. Lena got me ice cream, Mia announced proudly, and she told the nurse that she was my mom. Elena looked at Daniel, uncertainty in her eyes. I hope that was okay. They asked who I was, and it came out. I can call back and clarify if... It's okay, Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. It's more than okay. That night, after Mia was asleep, Daniel found Elena on the balcony, staring out at the city lights. I need to ask you something, he said, joining her, and I need you to be completely honest. Elena turned to face him, worry creasing her forehead. Okay. Are you happy? Daniel asked. Really happy? Because this life, it's not glamorous. It's scraped knees and bedtime negotiations and sometimes eating cereal for dinner because everyone's too tired to cook. It's not board meetings and power suits and changing the world. It's better, Elena said without hesitation. It's so much better. Daniel, I spent my whole life thinking success meant building an empire, being the smartest person in the room, never showing weakness. And I was good at it. But I was also lonely and scared and convinced that needing anyone was a failure. She took his hands, lacing their fingers together. This life, coming home to you and Mia, making terrible grilled cheese, helping with homework, kissing scraped knees, this is the success I didn't know I was looking for. This is what changes the world. Not products or profit margins, but love, family, building something that lasts. Daniel pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. I'm going to ask you to marry me, he said quietly. Soon. But I need you to be sure first. I need you to know what you're signing up for. I'm sure, Elena said. I've been sure since you stopped me from making a terrible mistake at the gala. Since you told me that if I were sober, you'd make the first move. I've been sure since you showed up at the board meeting and fought for us when it would have been easier to walk away. I'm sure too, Daniel said. I'm terrified, but I'm sure. Elena pulled back to look at him, her eyes bright. Then ask me. Right now, ask me. I don't have a ring, Daniel protested. I don't need a ring, Elena said. I just need you. So Daniel dropped to one knee on their balcony, in his sweatpants and old t-shirt, with the city spread out below them and their daughter sleeping safely inside, and he asked Elena Cross to marry him. I don't have a speech prepared, he said. I don't have a perfect plan or a romantic setting. But I love you. I love the way you love Mia like she's your own. I love how you burn grilled cheese and don't care. I love that you're brave enough to choose this life with us, even though it's messy and complicated and sometimes really hard. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and Mia's mother and the person I build the rest of my life with? Elena was crying, laughing, pulling him to his feet and kissing him all at once. Yes, she said between kisses. Yes, 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 1,000 times yes. They told Mia the next morning over pancakes, the ones Elena had finally learned to make without burning. We have something to tell you, Daniel said, and Mia looked up from drowning her breakfast in syrup. Are you getting married? She asked immediately. Elena laughed. How did you know? Because you've been looking at each other all funny, Mia said, like people do on TV before they get married, and Daddy's been acting weird for days. I have not, Daniel protested, but Elena was giggling and Mia was giving him a look that suggested she saw right through him. So, yes, Elena confirmed, we're getting married. How do you feel about that? Mia considered this seriously. Will I get to wear a fancy dress? The fanciest dress you want, Elena promised. And can I call you Mom instead of Lena? Elena's breath caught. If that's what you want, sweetheart, but only if you're comfortable with it. There's no rush. I'm comfortable, Mia said, because you're already kind of my mom anyway. You just didn't have the official title yet. Daniel had to turn away, overwhelmed by the simple truth of his daughter's words. Elena was already Mia's mother in all the ways that mattered, in the bedtime stories and the scraped knees and the fierce protective love that had grown between them. They got married in June at a small ceremony in Central Park, surrounded by family and friends and everyone who'd supported them through the hard times. Mia was the flower girl, wearing the fanciest dress in existence and taking her job very seriously. Marcus was Daniel's best man, giving a speech about integrity and courage that had half the guests in tears. Elena's father walked her down the aisle, and when he placed her hand in Daniel's, he said quietly, "Take care of my girl." "Always," Daniel promised. The ceremony was simple and honest, just like their relationship. They wrote their own vows, and when Elena promised to love Mia as her own daughter, to honor Sarah's memory while building new traditions, to choose courage over fear every single day, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Daniel promised to see Elena, not the CEO, not the title, just Elena, every single day for the rest of their lives. To build a life that balanced ambition and family, success and happiness, the world they worked in, and the world they came home to. "I promise to make the first move," he said, making Elena laugh through her tears. "Always, even when it's scary." They kissed while their friends and family cheered, and Mia threw flower petals with enthusiastic abandon, and somewhere in the warm June sunshine, Daniel felt like maybe Sarah was there too, smiling at the family they'd built from broken pieces and brave choices. The reception was at a restaurant near their apartment, intimate and joyful. Elena danced with Mia, both of them laughing as they spun in circles. Daniel danced with Sarah's mother, who told him again that her daughter would have loved Elena, would have been so happy he'd found someone who made him smile like that. Later, when the party was winding down and Mia had fallen asleep on Marcus's shoulder, Daniel and Elena stepped outside for a moment of quiet. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Brooks?" Daniel asked, pulling her close. Elena smiled, testing out the name. "Happy, terrified, grateful, all of it at once." "Good," Daniel said. "That means we're doing it right." "Did you ever think we'd get here?" Elena asked. "When you stopped me from kissing you at the gala, did you imagine this?" "Honestly, no," Daniel admitted. "I thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone, raising Mia and trying not to mess her up too badly. I thought the best I could hope for was stability and safety. And now? Now I have so much more than I ever dreamed of," Daniel said. "I have love and family and a partner who makes me want to be braver than I am. I have you." Elena kissed him softly. "We have each other, and we have Mia, and we have time to build something beautiful. Together," Daniel said. "Together," Elena agreed. A year later, they stood in the same park on a crisp October afternoon, watching Mia chase leaves with a group of friends from school. Elena's hand rested on her still, flat stomach, a secret they'd only shared with each other a week ago. In 6 months, Mia would be a big sister, and their family would grow in ways they were both excited and terrified to explore. "Are you ready for this?" Daniel asked, watching his daughter's joy and thinking about the chaos that was coming. "No," Elena said honestly, "but I wasn't ready for any of this. I wasn't ready to fall in love with you, or to become Mia's mother, or to blow up my carefully controlled life for something messy and real. But I did it anyway, and it was the best decision I ever made." "Even when it was hard," Daniel pressed. "Especially when it was hard," Elena said. "The hard parts are what make it real, what make it worth fighting for." Mia ran back to them, breathless and grinning. "Did you see how many leaves I caught, Mom? Did you see?" "I saw," Elena said, and the word Mom still made her eyes bright every time. "You were amazing." "Can we get hot chocolate?" Mia asked. "Please? I'm freezing." "Absolutely," Daniel said, taking one of Mia's hands while Elena took the other. "But you have to share with me. That's the rule." "That's not a rule," Mia protested, but she was giggling. "It is now," Daniel said. They walked through the park together, the family that had started with a drunk almost kiss and a line about making the first move, the family that had survived scandal and scrutiny, fear and courage, loss and love, the family that kept choosing each other every single day. Some love stories started with passion and fire, with dramatic declarations and sweeping gestures. But theirs had started with restraint and respect, with a man who'd been brave enough to say no when it mattered, and a woman who'd been brave enough to restructure her entire world for a chance at happiness. It had started with boundaries and ended with a family, with messy Sunday mornings and burned grilled cheese and a 5-year-old who'd learned that love came in many forms, that families could be built as well as born, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let yourself be happy. At the hot chocolate stand, Elena insisted on paying despite Daniel's protests. Mia got whipped cream on her nose and declared it the best day ever, even though nothing particularly special had happened. Just an ordinary October afternoon with her family, which was apparently exactly special enough. "I love you," Daniel said to Elena, while Mia was distracted by a dog walking past. "I love you too," Elena said. "Thank you for making the first move." "Always," Daniel promised, and he meant it for all the days to come. The easy ones and the hard ones, the ordinary afternoons and the extraordinary moments, the life they'd built and the future they'd keep building together. Because that was what love was, in the end. Not the absence of fear or difficulty, but the choice to keep moving forward anyway, to keep choosing each other, keep building together, keep believing that courage and honesty and showing up every day was enough to create something that lasted. And for Daniel and Elena Brooks, standing in a park with their daughter and their secrets and their hope for tomorrow, it was more than enough. It was everything. They walked home as the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Mia chattered about her day, about the leaves she'd caught, and the hot chocolate she'd conquered and the dog she wanted to adopt, even though they'd already said no 17 times. Elena caught Daniel's eye over their daughter's head, and in that glance was everything they'd been through and everything still to come. The challenges of balancing careers and parenting, the joy of watching their family grow, the small moments that would add up to a lifetime of love. "Race you home," Mia suddenly announced, taking off at a run. "Hey, no fair," Daniel called, jogging after her. Elena followed at a walk, watching her husband and daughter race each other down the sidewalk, their laughter echoing in the autumn air. In 6 months, there would be another child to chase, another person to love, another layer of complexity and joy. She couldn't wait. When she finally caught up to them at their building's entrance, Daniel was bent over, hands on his knees, dramatically declaring that Mia had won fair and square. Mia was doing a victory dance that involved a lot of spinning and nearly knocking over a potted plant. "My champion," Elena said, scooping Mia into her arms despite the girl's protests that she was too big to be carried. "My fierce, fast, amazing champion. I beat Daddy," Mia said proudly. "You did," Elena agreed. "You beat both of us." They rode the elevator up together, tired and happy and completely ordinary. They made dinner, pasta, because it was Tuesday, and Tuesday meant pasta in their house. They did homework at the kitchen table while Daniel cleaned up. They watched half an episode of Mia's favorite show before bath time, and teeth brushing, and the endless negotiation about what counted as pajamas. Finally, with Mia tucked into bed and her nightlight glowing, Daniel and Elena collapsed onto the couch in their living room. "We're going to have to do all of that again," Elena said, gesturing vaguely toward Mia's room. "In 6 months, with a baby who doesn't sleep and doesn't negotiate and needs us every 3 hours." "I know," Daniel said, pulling her close. "And we're going to be exhausted and overwhelmed and probably question our sanity multiple times." "Probably," Daniel agreed. "And somehow," Elena said softly, "I can't wait." "How is that possible?" Daniel kissed the top of her head. "Because we're building something worth being exhausted for. Because family is messy and hard and the most important thing we'll ever do." "When did you get so wise?" Elena asked. "I learned from the best," Daniel said. "A very smart CEO taught me that the hard parts are what make it real." Elena laughed, tilting her face up to kiss him properly. "I think I'm going to like being married to you, Daniel Brooks." "Good," Daniel said, "because you're stuck with me now." "Best decision I ever made," Elena murmured, settling against his chest. They sat there in the quiet of their home, listening to the sounds of the city outside and their daughter's soft breathing from down the hall. They thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a drunk, almost kiss, to a boardroom battle, to this moment of perfect, ordinary peace. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been simple. But it had been worth every difficult conversation, every moment of fear, every choice to be brave instead of safe. Because this was what it meant to truly live. Not just to survive each day, but to build something beautiful from the broken pieces. To choose love even when it was terrifying. To make the first move and keep moving forward together. And as they sat there in the home they'd built, with the family they'd chosen, and the future they were creating, Daniel and Elena both knew one fundamental truth. Some love stories didn't start with passion. They started with respect, with boundaries, with one person brave enough to say, "Not like this," and another brave enough to wait for "like this" instead. They started with restraint and grew because two people were willing to fight for what mattered, to stand up when it would have been easier to hide, to choose each other over and over again, even when the world told them not to. And those love stories? The ones built slowly and carefully, with intention and courage? Those were the ones that lasted forever.